Good. How are you, sir?
Good. Haven't seen you. So it's
Oh, back because I don't work on Mondays. You come in yesterday?
no, I didn't come in yet.
Oh, okay.
It's just like over the holiday break. It's just been gone. So yeah.
We were hot and trot working, doing
Oh,
absolutely nothing.
I know y'all were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, council, I'm going to call our work session to order. Our December 2nd, 2025 City Council work session is officially called to order, and I will turn it over to Jay Chapa.
Good afternoon and happy December. As far as upcoming and recent events, we don't have anything new from the city side, but there is a big tree lighting downtown this evening. So I want to remind everybody of that. On organizational updates and employee recognitions, we have a couple. I'm going to call Jess McAkron up to the podium to make a couple announcements.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So I'm joined by Deanna Giordano, as you know. So Deanna, as you know, was promoted to an assistant city manager a few months ago, but prior to that, she joined our city in June of 2021 as our HR director. And I've asked her to join me up here today because she did not share with us, but I happened to run across a post where in early November, she was recognized as the 2025 HR Professional of the Year by Fort Worth HR. So Fort Worth HR is a nonprofit that was founded in 1966, and it has over 600 members, all HR professionals in and around Fort Worth. And this is an organization that serves both businesses, nonprofits, governmental agencies, anybody and everybody in our Fort Worth region. And I've known that Deanna is very special and an incredible HR leader since joining the city and getting to work with her on day one. But I think this award is so special because she was not recognized by anybody here in the city of Fort Worth. She was recognized by a lady named Stacy Gillian with CMP, which is a local consulting firm, who Stacy recognized Deanna's talents, her knowledge, her contributions to the city, and Stacy submitted the recognition. Deanna was selected from a number of nominations for this award, and so it truly is an honor. And when she attended the awards night, she absolutely had no clue that she had been selected to receive this award. So she did not have her husband with her. She was just there to watch, and so quite surprised, but absolutely honored. She has done an incredible job for the city of Fort Worth in her last 4 years here. And even as an assistant city manager, she is still working closely with the HR department. Y'all know she led the recruitment for our new HR director, Kristen Smith, who's been on board now maybe not quite a month or so. But Deanna truly values our people, and she says it all the time. Our employees are what make the city of Fort Worth a success. She has really worked to build a culture of service and collaboration, both within the HR department, within the HR teams, but also between the HR department and all of the departments here within the city. And so for anybody that's ever worked with HR, you know that can not always be a very collaborative relationship, but she has truly led that culture of collaboration. So we're incredibly proud of her and honored to have her on our team. And with this, I just again want to recognize her for being the 2025 HR Professional of the Year for Fort Worth HR.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say after that, other than I'm glad to represent the city of Fort Worth and even glad to represent the HR profession. As Jess said, I think the people are really what make the city great, and I know in Fort Worth that's no small feat. The people that work here, we attract great talent, we keep great talent, and it's a great place to work, but I don't have to tell you all that because there's great people here in the audience and watching that know that, and it speaks for itself, so thank you.
This was her award that she got, and again, not only did she not tell anybody, she just quietly put this on the table. I mean, it was...
She's incredibly humble.
Yeah, very humble. Thank you, Deanna. So next up, I'm going to introduce to you Cynthia Serrano with our Public Events Department. Cynthia, many of you may know her. She has been with the city for 26 years, primarily tucked away at the Fort Worth Convention Center, where she's worked in public events for a long time. But recently, Cynthia was named Deputy Director of the Public Events Department, and she's doing an incredible job there. And she is going to now recognize a team within public events.
Thank you, Jessica. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'd like to recognize members of the Public Events team on recent accolades in the PR and communications. Last month, both Will Rogers Memorial Center and the Fort Worth Convention Center took home awards from the Greater Fort Worth chapter of the Public Relations Society of America. These awards were judged by PR executives and were awarded points based on quality research, planning, execution, and measurement of results, not to mention creativity. The Convention Center received a Worthy Award, the highest honor for a given category for its Phase 1 expansion topping out videos. Many of you attended that topping out ceremony in August of 2024, and several videos were created to document that milestone. They featured interviews with elected officials, tourism leaders, and our joint venture partners. What you didn't know is that weekend, Public Events Department Communications Coordinator, Andra Bennett, who's with us, became ill and could not be on site. Thanks to one city team, communication pros from CPE, library, water, and CMO jumped in to assist with media handling and on-site interviews. The video was beautifully filmed by Blissful Sky Studio, who made B-roll available within hours for media. All these contributors are here and deserve recognition as well. Dominique Anderson with Blissful Sky, thank you. The Will Rogers team received an award of excellence for a robust social media program with no dedicated social media manager position and 120 acres of daily events to cover. Members of the sales, and event coordinator team took the reins with the planning and creativity. Content to production increased the venue's followers by 32% in FY25 with an ad budget of only $500. Will Rogers is open 24 hours a day, 364 days a year. We are closed for Christmas. So the team uses an elaborate color-coded content calendar to assign posts that include every show, multiple arenas, the auditorium, the exhibit hall, know before you go information, parking maps, and trendy behind-the-scenes features. The team is led by Sales and Events Manager Christine Henry Gillette, who is not with us, and includes coordinators Lucy Puente, who is with us, Audrey Hall and Kendra Elder, Sales and Events Manager Charlie Petrick, and Director of Sales Jordan Steffen, who's also with us. Both venues punch well above their weight when benchmarked against their peer venues on Meta, ranking in the top 5 in the U.S. in the number of followers and content. So I encourage everyone watching and here in the room to follow us, both of our venues, on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So there's the plug. And keeping up with 100 events that are produced at our venues and the impressive city teams that keep the facilities not only operational, but safe and welcoming to millions of guests that visit Fort Worth. Thank you all for your time.
Congratulations to you all. Up next are informal reports. The first is 25-0128, the 2026 Affordable Housing Bond Proposition. Casey Thomas is here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Beck. Before we go into questions, I want to make a note. During our presentations, I'm going to move the last presentation, number 9, pertaining to possible local ordinance regarding sex offender residency, to the top of that. I just want to give staff an awareness before we get started so that Councilmember Larsdorf can go where he needs to be. Thank you. Councilmember Beck.
Hi, can you please walk me through the decision to put the $5 million in the bond, but also to restrict it only to for-purchase single-family homes?
Sure, yes. So Casey Thomas, Director of the Neighborhood Services Department. Part of the reason for that is the city does currently receive grant funds that we put towards affordable housing. The majority of those funds go towards multifamily affordable housing development. Only a small percentage has been used on the single-family affordable housing side. And so with the bond program, we were focused on the single-family housing only because we don't currently use our grant funds for that purpose. And then also too, with this being a new proposition, affordable housing being a new proposition for the bond program, we thought that focusing on the single-family residential, we may be able to generate more support from the community for that.
I appreciate that thought process. I have some concern about restricting the dollars to a specific type of project. I think what made our ARPA dollars so innovative and so effective when it came to affordable housing and permanent supportive housing is that we had those pot of dollars to partner with people, and right now that takes it away. This takes away our ability. I don't disagree with the idea of having building on our community land trust and the ability to purchase homes, affordable homes, not just rental properties, but we know that we still need those rental properties there. So I'd like to see that restriction taken off. I understand that it is new on the bond, but other entities, municipalities throughout this state, quite frankly, pass much larger housing bonds by scales of tenfold. And they pass. And so I'm not worried about affordable housing passing in Fort Worth, whether it be for single family for purchase or multifamily. I think either way, the voters are either going to choose it or they're not. I also would like to note that based on my bond meeting and the people that came out to speak, overwhelmingly they asked for more dollars to be put in the affordable housing portion of the 2026 bond. A particular note, the distinction was made that the city of Denton, who's much smaller than us, has a $12 million affordable housing bond, and so we're not even at Denton's level of what we're committing in our bond to affordable housing.
I think the plan in January is to bring back to the city council in a bond meeting all the feedback that we received across, and then to have the council and hash out what the final list would be and the amounts that go into that. So we can get that done by February so you could actually vote to have the election happen. So we'll be bringing that back in January.
And if I may add one more item, you mentioned the permanent supportive housing. One of the reasons why we didn't include permanent supportive housing as part of the proposal is because of the ongoing cost to provide those services. With the bond program, it would only be able to provide the one-time capital fund, but we would have to be able to identify external services to pay for those ongoing costs.
Well, wouldn't we do that in the same way we did through our partnerships and the ARPA dollars? You know, we gave money towards the capital, but those partners then provided the operational services of the permanent supportive housing?
We could potentially, we would just need to identify what those funding sources would pay for. For example, some of the ones where they partner with the HFC, we've been able to provide HFC funding for permanent supportive housing, but we would just need to identify that funding source.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Nettles.
Thank you. So I completely agree with Councilman Beck about not restricting these funds, because I think it's vitally important. For one example, when I approached the housing bond piece, I was considering some of the issues that we had with the Renaissance Columbia coming up short, and they was going to provide housing, and we didn't really have a mechanism to provide those dollars. And we squeezed them out through our general funds or through some other dollars that we had. And so I think the funds shouldn't be restricted. But when I asked for this IR in my bond meeting, they talked about wanting more dollars into the affordable housing. And was speaking with some of the staff, I think that the initial request, I'm not sure, I'm not gonna put words in the mouth, but it was $40 million to actually do what needed to be done. And I wanted to see in the IR what we could do with the $40 million versus what we can do with the $5 million. I see what you articulated here, but I don't see the breakdown of what we can do with more dollars. And it's not in this hour. That's what I originally asked for.
Or additional, okay.
We can provide some recommendations on how those funds could be used.
So to Jay, what you're saying about come back in January, I think if we're going to have a true discussion about putting more dollars in in the housing or not putting more dollars, we need to be able to see if we put 12 million, we're able to do X, Y, and Z.
That's fine, we can provide that information. We should also need to outline what we're gonna take out of the bond to replace
Correct.
those dollars through, as part of the process.
Anyone else questions for Casey? Thank you, Casey, appreciate it.
Okay, the next IR is 25-0129, and that's an amendment to the Economic Development Program Policy and Tax Abatement Policy with 380 Policy and Tax Abatement Policy. And Jessica Rogers here is to answer any questions. No?
Keep rolling.
Okay, the next one's 25-0130. It's the Economic Development Quarterly Report, and Jessica Rogers is here to answer any questions. Okay, next one's 25-0131, City Council request for future agenda items and/or reports, a write-up on the status of those and the process.
Yes, I have a question, Mayor.
Councilmember Nettles, I think Bethany is here.
Thanks, Bethany. If you can kind of give us an overview of the hour you provided, and then one of my specific questions was, do we have a time frame of future agenda items, such as if we ask for one today, are we looking at a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day window of receiving that feedback in an hour?
Sure. Hi, Councilman Nettles. Bethany Warner, Assistant to the City Manager. I'll start with the overview, and then I'll go to that question, which the general overview of this IR is it talks about the section of your work session agenda where you do the City Council requests for future agenda items and/or reports, and kind of the process it follows when council members make requests at that time. Those requests can take multiple forms depending on the complexity of the information requested. For example, it might become an IR, it might become a budget response during a budget work session, it might become a presentation, it might be a direct email response from staff. Depends on what was requested, the time it takes to pull that together, the complexity, and what the council member is hoping to find. It outlines a bit in this IR that process where, the day after generally one of these meetings, CMO is going to look at those requests, identify which departments have that information or multiple departments, assign an avenue for what that should look like to be resolved, whether it be an IR or a different format, and what a tentative timeline for that might look like. And then the following packet that council receives from CSO, generally the ones that become IRs are assigned a tentative preliminary date for when we anticipate that to come. But as we know, sometimes that date shifts as we delve into what it takes to pull that information together from the departments. So to your question, it really is dependent on what is requested. I don't think we have a standardized timeline of when a request happens. There is a specific date that information needs to be provided, because some information can be provided to you right away. If it's a simple question that requires a simple answer, staff can follow up quite quickly. And some information is bundled together with other ongoing efforts at the city into a more complex, robust response that requires research and potentially multiple departments involved.
All right. Well, some of my concern is, one, council members don't typically set the agenda. The only time we get opportunity to add something to the agenda is through an IR presentation or IR request or future agenda item. And so, and most of my future agenda items are coming from residents' concerns or dealing with staff issues or whatever that may be, or how we can broaden the scope or actually put it on the record, put it publicly. So I don't agree. Well, let me ask you this question. Who determines whether it is a direct response to the council member, or is it going to be an IR or a presentation? Is that the city manager's office or the department head, a leader?
Yeah,
Okay.
so typically, like Bethany mentioned, tomorrow morning we'll go through all the requests. And if it's an item very specific to like a property in one district, we typically ask the staff member that's going to be dealing with that department to respond to the council member through an email, because it doesn't necessarily pertain to the city. It's not a citywide issue or to all the council members. And then that way you have a written record of it, and if you wanted to send it out to, to put it in IR just extends the overall process and the presentation when we can answer the question fairly quickly. Is the thought process. If you all don't want us to do that and have an IR regardless of what the question is, we can do that. It just adds more work, creates more process. And the idea behind an email to address a specific issue is to shorten the timeline and be more efficient. So.
Let me add maybe a note here, Bethany, in this IR towards the end in the tracking process improvements. It sounds like you are implementing a new tracking system, sort of centralized way of understanding where all these are, which I think has been maybe part of the problem. I think some council members have been kind of confused who's owning what.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
Yeah, and so I think to Councilmember Nettles' point, it's probably nice for him to know I can email Bethany and she can tell me, you know, Jess is working on that right now. We have a general idea of a timeline, because if you're communicating back to a constituent, maybe that also creates less friction back and forth.
Yes, absolutely. The CMO support team is working with the city secretary's office to create a better place to look for the status of these different requests, so we can better track how it was resolved, when it was resolved, who's leading on it, where it is in the process, so we can follow those trails better for you whenever you're not sure where a request ended up and you're looking for a status update.
And part of the process, we don't have another work session, for instance, till January. And so in some cases, the informal report or the request for the informal report could be outdated by then, so that sometimes we want to expedite that process and provide the information to the person that asked the question. So it just all depends.
Yeah, well, I'll be clear. I don't disagree with direct responses, but I would say sometimes, even if we get a direct response from your office or anyone else's office, the council members should also have the opportunity to say, well, we still want an IR, so that it's on public record.
Sure, yeah, I think that's fine.
Thanks, Bethany.
The next one is emergency overnight cold weather overflow sheltering, and Tara Perez is here to answer any questions.
I'd like an overview, please, and if, Tara, could you give us also stats from the last couple nights if you have them?
Tara Perez with CMO. So, Councilmember Hill, you asked for a general overview of the process?
Yeah, general overview of the process, and also if you have stats from the last couple nights, I think that'd be helpful too.
Okay. So the city funds through a contract with a nonprofit, When We Love. So when our regular emergency shelter beds are full, on certain cold weather nights, that the city funds extra beds. So we use city facilities, but have a nonprofit, When We Love, that provides the staffing to run this. The goal is just that if anyone is seeking warmth on a cold night, that they're able to find it. If not at a regular shelter, at one of the city shelters. The stats, so far this year, we have been on standby. That's when we meet certain weather triggers. We've been on standby 3 nights, and we have activated 1. So the difference is the other 2 nights, there were beds available in our existing shelters. So when there's still beds, we don't open. And 1 night we did activate because we ran out of women's beds in the emergency shelters.
Where are we putting these additional beds?
I'm sorry?
Where are we putting these additional beds? Are they in different locations across the city? Is it a centralized location?
So we are using some city facilities, community centers. And so there are 3 that have agreed to do this. Last year, we were able to just use 1 the whole time, but we have backups in case we ever need them.
Councilmember.
Yeah, what are those 3? The community centers that we're using?
Okay, the first one is Hanley Meadowbrook. And then the second one is Hawes, that's an athletic facility. And then the third is a backup to Hanley, which is Riverside Community Center.
Councilmember Flores.
Oh, no problem. Mine is related too. I did notice that DRC put out some cold weather shelter information as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that if you know the details about what they're doing?
About DRC?
Yes.
Okay, to my knowledge, I didn't know. Sometimes they work with When We Love. Do you think it was supporting that effort with the city?
It doesn't mention that in their post. This was on social media that I found it.
Okay.
But, you know, they're asking that that information get widely shared. It says dial 311 or 817-392-1234 in our call center and press 9 for details.
Okay, so that may be DRC just helping us get the message out. So that's the information we distribute to our partners and shelters and our community organizations that work with people experiencing homelessness, and our outreach teams directly distribute that information to people experiencing homelessness. And so it's just, they call the city's 311 and they can press 9 and they'll know if it's activated or not.
Yeah, because it's not site-specific. It doesn't mention those 3 sites. And what was the third one again, Tara? I'm sorry.
Riverside Community Center.
Okay.
The reason we don't mention those a lot is because they're not walk-up sites. People cannot just walk up and say, I'm here for cold weather shelter, and that's done very purposely to mitigate any effects on neighborhoods. And so we ask everyone to please report to the regular emergency shelters. If those are full, then they just go across the street to True Earth Place, which is where the intake is. And then Trinity Metro provides transportation from True Earth Place to the overflow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Tara? Yes, Councilor Nettles.
One more question.
Councilor Hall.
I'm sorry, thank you, Mayor. Is there transportation provided, like if you're in a different part of the city, is there transportation provided to get you to the emergency location?
So we have kind of 2 levels. So when we are going to have like extreme weather like ice storms, we also distribute bus passes to police officers. So if they are seeing people, and then we have already distributed bus passes to our outreach workers that are not in the East Lancaster area so that they can give them the information about the shelter and they have the bus pass to get to East Lancaster.
Thank you.
Councilor Nettles.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, and it's kind of to one that Dr. Hall just spoke about. When I'm looking at these shelters, you got Hanley Meadowbrook, East Side, Halls is right here downtown, and Riverside is close by downtown. Mm-hmm. So there's not any that's on the outskirts of the inner city, such as Crowley Road or even North Fort Worth.
Okay, so when we looked at those locations, and we looked for a few things. One was just city facilities, and so that helps us keep the cost down for our cold weather shelter operations is using city facilities. And then we work very closely with the park department to determine which are the best ones. For example, what we're looking for overflow sheltering is a large gym. But also it needs to be in a place. This is, last year was the first year we had Trinity Metro shuttle people, and so we were relying before that on bus stops. So we looked at, you know, what facilities are near a bus stop, and then also the setup of the community center. For example, being able to easily block off the community center except for the restrooms and the gym. And so we look at those things. And again, we used these 3 last year, but only Hanley was ever used because it had, the most we had there was 140 people. It was very full then, but it was 140 people. And so we don't open all 3 at the same time. It's just if Hanley gets full, then we would open Hawes.
Okay, 2 questions in one, or 1 question in 2, whatever. Have we opened it up to churches? I know you said to officers may have bus passes, but I do know some of our homeless people may go to some of our local churches or even call. And the other question is, what is our communication with our other nonprofits around Fort Worth so they can refer people to this 311 or to Hanley or to some police officers?
Okay, I'll take the second question first. So we have a sign up, there's an email notification list. So we have about 150 partners that receive that. So whenever they received it last night from me that says, hey, we're on a cold weather standby tonight. And so that goes to about 150 different people from, I'm not sure, but probably at least 40 to 50 different organizations in the city. Some of our internal city departments to let them know, but a lot of them are our hospitals and our nonprofit partners. And so that's how we get the word out there, is through email. But then our partners like Partnership Home, and it sounds like DRC, are reposting the city's information to let people know about the cold weather shelter. So that's how they know about that. Some churches do sheltering operations. We don't have a compiled list of who's doing that. Sometimes it's sporadic. So sometimes people are just driving down, it's very cold, and so they'll get motel rooms for some folks for the night. But it doesn't always have a regular rhythm. We do work with some nonprofits that do that to make sure they're aware of our cold weather overflow, and they've been really helpful in picking up folks and bringing them to the overflow site.
Can people sign up to be part of this 150 list that you have?
Yes.
Okay. Can you provide that to the council?
Yes, just that you want me to sign you up for to get the email alerts?
No, provide us information on how people can sign up for this.
Okay, that's just emailing me.
Just emailing you?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
just
Oh,
email me.
I have
We
that
keep
already.
the list.
All right, thank you.
Tara,
Yes.
given the state of construction over there, you know, Handley Meadowbrook is in my district. And so it's almost impossible to get to now. Have you all looked at that now? That road is closed literally when you come off 820. So have you looked at that? Are we able to still use that facility?
I haven't, when we spoke with Trinity Metro, we do kind of a after-action call whenever we activate shelter.
Okay.
Trinity Metro didn't mention any problems about that, but I can follow up and see if they're having any difficulty.
Yeah. If you would follow up, I was over there the other day, and that road from 820, the exit to get on there, you have to go a circuitous route now to get to the center, and I want to make sure that people are able to get to it and use it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tara. Good
Thanks,
to see
Tara.
you.
Next one is 25-0133, this food services program at City Hall.
Questions on this one, council? Okay.
Okay, next one's 25-0134, gunshot detection technology update, and Deputy Chief Mark Barton
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I think we got
And
lots
I
of
would like an update on that, because we get lots of complaints about gunshots in various neighborhoods in D5.
Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Chief?
We'll go back. Okay. No problem. Mark? No, you didn't. You're all good. Chris, go ahead, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. So are there any specific questions y'all are wanting to know that weren't included in the IR?
Maybe start with just an overview, and then they can ask questions if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank
you. So we currently have the gunshot detection technology in 5 areas around the city. Those were selected based on historical gunshot statistics. Year to date, between January and November 16th, there have been over 6,000 audio alerts. Those include false alarms. Those include gunshots that were detected by multiple devices. So it's not an accurate number of how many shots have been actually captured by the devices. The best breakdown, we don't have a specific way to track each device as how long or how many times it alerts, but the best breakdown we could come up with is our devices that are in South Division have activated 1,522 times. Our East Division devices have activated 622 times. And then in Northwest, we've had 186 alerts. We were not able to gather the statistics for West Division. And the one that's for South Division, that's 76104, so that's short south, so that's kind of being lumped in with Central Division. So we don't have the statistics for Deep South also. Of those incidents, we haven't issued any citations as a result of these detections. If it's an actual gunshot, discharging a firearm is a Class A misdemeanor, so we wouldn't issue a citation in that case anyway. But we have had a few instances where these have led to arrest. But in most cases, the gunshot detection actually assists us with follow-up investigations, tracking down leads, and confirming information for detectives in their casework.
Councilmember Crane?
Yeah. Is there a reason you couldn't get the West numbers?
It wasn't explained to me, but I will find out and get it to you.
I think for an accurate picture, yeah, I'd like to
Yes,
have
sir.
one, please. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez, Councilmember Peoples?
No, so what I mean when I say it's not effective for arrest is most of the time, if it's an actual gunshot where they're picking up a legitimate shooting, that shooting has already been called into 911, and we don't have a way to differentiate the two. So it's hard to sparse out those stats specifically. What we do is we can reach out to the individual detectives and ask them if they keep any notes on their shootings. And so it's more anecdotal than empirical information.
Councilmember Martinez?
Do we know if all the equipment, gunshot equipment detecting, is currently working that we have out in the field?
Yes, and yeah, I think we would have notifications that it's not accurately working. We would send that to Flock or ACOM, whoever owns that particular equipment, and they would come out and replace it.
So what was the reasoning for acquiring this technology, like in these specific neighborhoods? You said that there was a lot of gunshot detections. Were there a lot of, people getting shot, or was it just discharging of firearms?
Well, so that was before my time, but like I said, it was based on historical information for probably all of the above. Gunshots, reported gunshots, actual shooting victims, and just general complaints. So I can't speak to what specific call types they looked at when they identified these neighborhoods because I was not involved with that, but it was probably all of them.
Okay, like Councilwoman People said, this is one of the top complaints at community meetings that I've been to. Even students, when I go to career day, have concerns about gunshots. So what's the point of having this equipment if we're not going to address those? Discharging of firearms, are there not any heat maps where we can identify certain areas and do a detail to try to catch these offenders?
Oh, sure, and so I don't want it to sound like we're not doing anything with the information when it comes in. Like I said, with the gunshot detection, if a shooting actually occurs, more times than not, that call has actually come into 911 at the same time or before we get the gunshot detection alert. Those calls always get investigated regardless. If we get notifications from a council member that they have concerns that a specific neighborhood is seeing an increase in gun violence, shots fired calls, we will absolutely address that in multiple ways. Because of the limitations with the technology, we don't move the gunshot detection because this is way above my intelligence level, but they use algorithms and whatnot to place these sensors so that they can triangulate and determine where that shot or where that noise is coming from. And to move these devices it's very labor intensive, and what we can do, I suppose, to what you're saying is if we notice that the trends are moving from where these were originally placed, we can certainly go to the vendor and look at moving them to where the new trends are showing they should be. But for sure, if there's gun violence, we are investigating it and absolutely pursuing those cases, regardless of if it occurs near this equipment or not.
Well, I tell people to call if you hear gunshots, and sometimes you see PD drive by, or sometimes you call and you go back to bed. But there are certain households that are discharging firearms regularly. Are we not looking at the data of where those, the area where those gunshots are coming from to try to address that problem property?
Oh yes, absolutely. That gets investigated and then gets addressed by whatever unit. If it's determined to be a gang problem, our gang detectives and gang officers will do enforcement in those areas. If it's just random gun violence or gunshots where a neighbor just likes to go out in their backyard and shoot off some rounds, we are absolutely following up on that.
Well, just the numbers don't really reflect that.
Deborah, will you turn your mic on?
622 fire shots in the Stall-Cup-Berry area on the East Division. What are we doing with that information? Are we using it to up gang units? Are we using it to increase patrols? I mean, I'm with her. Do we want to spend this money to do this if we're not going to use the data to help control crime?
Excellent question. And I will say, you know, with regards to gunshot detection, although obviously new here to Fort Worth and before my time as well, but from the national conversation with gunshot detection, you're 100% right. We need to figure out exactly if this technology is worth it. The reality of it, the reality of it is it's normally coupled with a crime actually occurring that we respond to. I've heard in many different places, I've heard the arguments with regards to individuals firing gunshots from their homes, and gunshot detection isn't the panacea when a gunshot is coming off of someone's backyard, as an example, if it's not coupled with a crime. There's legal aspects of us going into a home to make an arrest just based on gunshot detection and coordinating exactly where it's coming from. Obviously, when officers have the time and there is gunshots that ring out, officers certainly can go in that area. Areas that I've found incredibly successful has been when we've had chronic areas in certain neighborhoods going after the fact, utilizing MPOs and possibly going after the fact to make contact with individuals to have some awareness of the issue. But with regards to the reality of it in real time, unless we're capturing it with our flock cameras, going to the real-time crime center, generally speaking, it's more of an awareness. If it's coupled with a crime, absolutely, it assists, but it's not the panacea as it pertains to someone shooting out of their backyard and necessarily other things from doing something at the moment as opposed to coming in afterwards with MPOs or others for awareness in that neighborhood, if that makes sense. But as a police department, we do need to go back and see if the money we're spending in this technology is worth it. That's 100% accurate.
I would like to see us do that, because I know this sounds crazy. I'm looking at this 622, wondering how many of them came on New Year's Eve. Everybody in the world is out there shooting guns on New Year's Eve, and most of them, while it is a crime, they do it because it's a habit. I mean, how many of these are actually like during the peak summer and all that?
One, I would tell you, Councilmember, probably during New Year's time, quite a few. 4th of July, quite a few. And so I do say, I mean, if we sit back realistically and look at if we were to respond to every gunshot during New Year's and the 4th of July, which are arguably, in my experience, some of the most violent times in a major city, you can see where the rubber meets the road a little bit with regards that if it's not attached to a crime. So I do understand from, obviously, with our community, and us looking at the technology, because there is a frustration that we have a technology, why aren't we doing something about it when a gunshot goes off? That is a question that we need to ask ourselves, because to your point, in those heavy times, which also are the heaviest times that we are staffed, if we can imagine dispatching police officers to every gunshot detection that goes off, that's not not related to a crime, our men and women will be running around the city looking for that.
So I just want us to do something about those repeat offenders at least. I know it's a misdemeanor, right? But, you know, if they're shooting every weekend, doesn't that build up the severity of the offense?
Well, again, Councilmember, I think it's one of those issues I know I get, particularly in my experience, and we'd have to drill down exactly where they're occurring. But if individuals are shooting from their backyards, as an example, to pinpoint necessarily where that goes, gunshot detection is not the panacea to pinpoint exactly where it is. And so that's why follow-up with the community, which is helpful, bringing communities on board if it is an issue, to have community meetings with regards to having the community build strength with regards that we have your back, but we need some pressure from the community to say that this doesn't belong here, how unsafe it is, and also follow up by our MPOs after the fact when we get those reports is important. But certainly the realization and really the having the mindset and the understanding with our community to understand that simply having this technology isn't the panacea for every gunshot that's not related to a violent crime.
Okay, well then you're a data guy, so give us the data, let me know where the hotspots are, and I can work with my community to start addressing those problem properties.
Yes, Councilmember.
Yes, Councilmember Flores.
Another question for you, and, maybe Deputy Chief, you can handle this. I think this is more of a question for the flock people, okay? I'm just going to put it out there. Based on what I'm hearing right here, I think that, again, I don't know the details of the sophistication, of the detection equipment, but I would think that it should be able to harvest certain data, for example, frequency of occurrence over time at certain locations. And then it uses GIS to do triangulation to locate where these may be coming from. Well, does it automatically locate based on 911 calls? Say somebody calls and said, hey, I heard a gunshot. Detection equipment heard something in the vicinity. Is the software sophisticated enough to say, hey, guess what? This is within the certain area, certain distance from one another, associate it with it to help police in investigating. Does it do that?
That is a good question for Flock. I can't answer that for them, but I know that we do that manually. Our real-time crime center does that.
Yeah, and see, there you go. I mean, that could be automated.
So that is something we'll take back to Flock and ask if it's a capability that they currently have, and if so, how do we turn that on? Or if that's something that they can add in the future to let us test out and see how effective it is.
All right, thank you.
I think we wanted to go back to the food services program.
Yes, thank you.
If you don't mind, Councilman, can we do the second, 1 second collaborative update? Because I think it kind of borders on Mayor, it kind of borders along with the shop update. We'll go back to that. Because there are questions I wanted to ask about.
Councilman Peoples, I think the request is we'll just keep rolling. We'll get to make sure we get to your IR, though. We won't.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, the
Chief.
next one is 25-0135, 1 second collaborative update. And Assistant Chief,
Since we're talking about crime, we might as well.
Aldridge is here.
Mine as well. Mayor,
That's right.
Council, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
Good to see you, Robert.
Good. Assistant Chief Aldridge, Fort Worth Police Department. So we have to kind of go in a time capsule to talk about 1 second collaborative a little bit. We weren't in this building. We had a different chief, had a different city manager. Some of the council members weren't even on council. So, we go back to September of 2022 is whenever we kind of started this adventure with the 1 second collaborative. Entered into a contract agreement with them it was December of 2022 till May of this year. It was about a little over $4.4 million, and that was to help with the main goal of reducing violent crime in some of our high violent crime communities, improve capacity of community-based organizations, and suppress youth gun violence. And they did that with 4 different strategies or objectives. One was to, of course, get an implementation plan. How are we going to do this? How does it look? How does it look in the city of Fort Worth and for Tarrant County as a whole? The other was to reduce the incidence of deaths from our teen violence by 5%, decrease violent crime in the city of Fort Worth by 10% over 12 months, and have a sustainment project for success beyond this program. So the implementation, we have several members on the steering committee. Myself, Deputy Chief Martin from the police department were there. We had members from Fort Worth ISD. We had Crowley ISD. We had council members, Councilman Flores, former council member Jared Williams was on this panel. We also had advocates from Mothers Against Murdered Angels, Lena Pope Home, One Safe Place, Center for Children's Health, VIP Fort Worth, Community Frontline, Communities in Schools, and Strategies to Elevate People of Color. We selected 9 different zip codes, and those zip codes were based on the crime, the violent crime that we had, whether it was within Tarrant County or Fort Worth. The vast majority of these were in Fort Worth, obviously, because we occupy most of Tarrant County. And so whenever we started looking at, what grants we're going to give to some of these partner agencies, they had a panel that they put together. They looked at some of these applications. And so they looked for intervention, outreach workers, prevention, suppression, and reentry type programs. And so during the first phase around July of 2023, they awarded $2.1 million to some of these partner agencies to help with some of those efforts. They awarded micro grants back in October of 2024 to 12 agencies in the amount of $89,000. And then they also did continuation grants for 15 other agencies for about $800,000 in January of 2025. So the outputs, if you look at it, although we were looking at 9 different zip codes because those were our violent crime areas, they serve 63 different zip codes around the community, 52 crime prevention programs, over 18,000 total participants, over 7,000 participants from the age of 13 to 24. There were 285 community events. We had over 1,600 youth received violence interruption type efforts. We had over 4,200 families receive affordable housing and assistance, and 1,100, there was reported of 1,100 individuals improved behavior, improved school attendance for 683. So, you know, whenever you look at the outcomes, 78% reported an improvement in their attitude, 83% demonstrated positive life changes, and 70% avoided behaviors that could have led to an arrest. So some of the deliverables is that during this time frame, we saw a 58% drop in the youth fatalities, and we also saw a 13% decrease in our violent crime across the city. And you've seen that we've seen a considerable decrease as the years have gone on. And so at the conclusion of this, the funding ran out for One Second Collaborative, and so although that program has ceased, some of those programs have started to apply for grants within CCPD for our partners with the shared mission, so we're trying to continue some of those moving forward. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions for Chief Aldridge?
So, Chief, I know you said they've started applying for CCPD.
Yes.
And you don't have to tell me the name of the groups, but are you looking at their success rate under this program?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, we want to have positive outcomes, and that's really part of the Partners with the Shared Mission program is that we have key objectives that we want them to meet, and they're evaluated each year. I did fail to mention on the last page, you can see the partner agencies that we, that One Second Collaborative helped fund, and the amounts that were funded, throughout this program.
Councilman Crane.
Sorry, maybe I'm missing it here, but some have stars on it, on SC funded. Are those ones that have already received CCPD funds as well?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. For the OSC committee, are they still convening?
They are not, no ma'am.
Okay. And then I know a part of the IR, I know there's going to be some next steps, and I know one of the goals of the initial program was to have a sustainment program.
Yes.
Is there a timeline or an expectation of when that may manifest or what the next steps are to create that program?
So our goal in our Partners with the Shared Mission is to try and get people to that sustainment area. And so if they start coming into, into the CCD program under Partners with the Shared Mission, that's what, we have that progression, where they get development grants, and then we try and get them into sustainment grants and get them self-proficient as they move on.
I guess this is more of maybe a suggestion than a question, but as we move forward in this, I want to applaud the efforts of the One Second Collaborative and the outcomes that we did get from this initiative. I would encourage that there be a systemic approach, perhaps, on what that sustainable programs look like, and I'm really glad that there are the capacity for some of these organizations were able to grow underneath this initiative, and they're going to be able to apply through CCPD. But we still have opportunities, I think, with the school districts.
Yes.
To partner along with, law enforcement and the other nonprofits and these organizations that did, contribute to these outcomes. So I'm just encouraging that we would take this momentum and not let this kind of die.
I agree with you 100%.
And try to do something systemic and continue to make an impact for our youth, because it's a huge deal. A 58% drop in teen shooting deaths is a huge impact in our community, yes. And we need to continue, and that should be a priority.
Absolutely,
for us as a city.
And it takes all of us, not just the police department.
It is. So thank you for your efforts on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? No? Okay. We'll keep going, and then we'll go to the end.
Next is 25-0136, update on panhandling enforcement. Monica Martin, Deputy Chief, is here to answer any questions.
So, Chief, can you brief us on the program? It is a big issue in the eastern part of my district about panhandlers. They're off 30.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Peoples. As we all know, the issue with panhandling and it's very complex, it's very ambiguous, it's definitely ongoing. That's why I felt it was important to create an informal report where you could see what each of your division representatives, your commanders, were doing with their teams of MPOs as well as our HOPE team. As you can see, it is unique throughout each division. What one division doesn't necessarily work for another division. However, I want to emphasize that the people that we come in contact with, they are all not the same. Some are absolutely struggling with homelessness, with addiction, and maybe even both. But we also are aware that there are others that are out here for opportunities as far as making money, right? And we're not far removed from recognizing that. However, that is why we have to stay balanced and consistent with the programs that we create, with the strategies that we come up with, like understanding what our vehicles and what our drivers are and what are motivating these people, because they have different motivations. Some are out here trying to survive, and some are making money. Some go home at the end of the day. Some drive nice cars at the end of the day. But also panhandling is also part of freedom of speech. So that's why we have to dive into the behaviors. If they're stepping out and blocking traffic, if they're creating a public safety for our community or for themselves. And so that's why we work with our council members, we work with our HOPE team, which are here today, standing behind us. Each and every day they go out there and they're making these connections, meeting these individuals that may be in need or have a crisis or may not. But the goal is to identify one or the other in both situations. And so collaboration is another key part of the panhandling crisis that we are experiencing. That's why we work with our council members, especially on environmental solutions. We have reached out to several of you with lighting or cutting down trees or even helping us put up signage to bring that awareness and education component to our community leaders in our city community. Because at the end of the day, with those that are taking advantage of the community, they're doing it because they're getting a profit. They're playing on people's compassion, right? So if we can educate our citizens on being more aware that when you give, and I've been in a line off of East Chase where I've seen 10 people stick their hand out and drop money into buckets, well, do you think the people are gonna leave at that point in time? Absolutely not. They're there for a profit. It's the biggest business scheme you can ever see, right? So we have to stay on top of that education and awareness. When you guys are having your town halls, reach out to us. Invite our HOPE team, invite our community leaders, and invite our business owners. We have to make sure that this awareness component is out here, because there are certain parameters that we're gonna always have to navigate and be in as far as law enforcement is concerned that sometimes limits us with what we can do. However, but that collaboration component, although it's complex, it's ambiguous, we have to not be afraid of the complexity. We have to learn that complexity, learn from it to come up with better solutions on how we are addressing the problem.
Councilman Martinez.
Chief Martin, you mentioned that, the data looks different for each division, yes. So really inconsistent. Is there any way we can get some numbers for those divisions that, and expanding on the efforts in those areas where we got very little or no numbers? You would think that East and South would have like higher enforcement in their area. Well, I mean, maybe because I'm more familiar with South and East.
Right.
Do you think it's because constituents aren't reporting panhandling like they do in other areas?
Part of that is part of the case, right? That's why I say, like, when you have your town halls, invite us so we can bring the education and awareness, because, like, that data tells a story. But if we're not getting the data, we're not going to allocate resources to an area that's saying that they don't need it. So we have to continue to spread the message that if you are seeing individuals out here that are panhandling, whether they may genuinely need it or not, we have to know about these areas, and the only way we know about those areas is if we're getting the calls. I know a lot of times you guys receive calls from the constituents, but they gotta also call us and let us know about it as well.
Do you feel like these, it's okay not to give signs that we put up in hotspots are working, or what are you seeing or hearing?
So it's a matter of the heart, right? If someone has a giving heart, they can see that sign all day and still not be discouraged from giving money if that's what their heart is telling them to do. So again, there's the complexity in that you can't control someone's heart if it's on their heart to give. So I would say that yes, it may work, but also if someone is going to give, they're going to give.
Councilmember Hill.
I had a couple questions on the special detail. There was a certain, I guess, specific time period that those areas, it looked like West Division, North Division focused on panhandling specifically. Do you believe that was effective, and is that something that all divisions are going to start doing?
I think that anything that we can implement and test and strategize for is always effective. It's about really getting the after-action report to see where we need to build upon, what worked, what didn't work. I'm sorry, I can't see you. What worked or what didn't work. So sorry, 5-3 right here. But no, I wouldn't say that the things that we're doing is not effective. It may just be that we have to build upon it and redirect.
I guess I'm thinking of some of the, sorry, Alan, you're going to have to move your head. I guess I'm specifically thinking of the frequent flyers that go to the same intersections over and over and over again. If they see an increase of police presence, that seems to me that that's a stronger deterrent than just once in a while someone will report it and they'll get caught. And I guess that's what I'm looking for, especially in, I think, D7, D3. There's two specific corners that I'm thinking of that it's the same people every single day, and they're not going away.
Right.
So whatever we can do to, I guess, raise the visibility of the police presence in those areas, I think is helpful for our constituents to see that we're doing something about it. And then two, they probably live in the area. I don't know what you do about that, but being able to spread the word to make sure that people do understand that use the My Fort Worth app to report it is very effective. And even though the panhandling signs are there, I think to your point, people are still going to give, but we need to encourage people to also report.
Yes, and that's where I lean on you guys as council members. Again, the education, that awareness component, if you can bring us into your town hall meeting so we can talk to the constituents, our community members, and continue having this conversation, because a lot of times we'll have this conversation and then you go months and months down the road until someone calls and it becomes a bigger problem. So again, we have to stay balanced and we have to stay consistent with this problem just because of the complexities that surround it.
Okay, I guess I would just like to see that special detail happen again, maybe more frequently.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Councilmember Peoples?
So, Deputy Chief, you already named the hot spot. You know, East Chase off I-30, there's a panhandler on every corner, and I realize there are people in need, but the residents there feel totally beleaguered. And so I think the signage may help there because it gives some people permission not to give. So while I want to help the homeless, I really do. I also know that's a major problem at that intersection, and if we could put up some signage there, I think that would help.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe there is a sign that is there that faces north and one on the south end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we need some more. But I was told that one person, they said, well, I don't have any cash, and the person said, well, I take credit cards.
Oh, wow. That wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, wow. Okay, so.
That wouldn't surprise me. But yes, our plan and our goal is to definitely stay consistent with what we're doing.
Here's my Venmo. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Crane.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief Martin. Thanks to all the Hope guys, men and women back there. Appreciate y'all, what you're doing. Specifically, to follow up on Councilmember Hill, this may be what this is meant in the west side. It says Hewlin Street and Montgomery Street. Is that Hewlin and 30 and Montgomery and 30?
Hewlin Street and Montgomery,
Yeah.
yes.
If not, I would just point that out because it is consistent there, as well as University and Camp Bowie, that traffic circle there. Not traffic circle, but you know what I'm talking about. Consistent there, and we consistently get text messages from people. So if we know they're hot spots, I understand that it's a little bit of playing whack-a-mole. They're going to move from one place to another. But the more we can do that, I'd appreciate that too.
Yes, and what I can also do is make sure that our commanders are staying in constant contact with you guys to let you know that when we are doing these special details and when you are coming in contact or if you're getting community calls, you are aware and can let them know what we're doing as well.
Really more of a comment. When you read through the report, like West Division has specific numbers on calls for service and then the efficacy of those calls, specifically arrests. Do you have that data for each other division?
So when we got the data from each division, we just wanted to foresee what they were doing. So a lot of them did give information that wasn't consistent, and they may have been by design, so that when we build this out, we can become more consistent with calls for service.
Yep.
How many citations have been rendered to individuals, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So this information was very much preliminary, but moving forward, we will definitely streamline it so that it can answer the questions that you guys have specifically towards the data.
Well, and we can work with Jay and Senna and the rest of the team, and your council members may have some thoughts about this too, but the way we may publicize this information on our website and on a more regular basis, I think could be helpful to point to, because sometimes people make the assumption you're not doing anything on panhandling, and that could be further from the truth. And some of this data, I think, really does demonstrate your efforts are working, and I think we are making inroads. We just maybe have to communicate that a bit better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. And just to clarify, and I think this kind of piggybacks on what Mayor was saying, are the protocols the same and the expectations the same through each of the divisions? So like what might happen if I call about panhandling in South? Would it be the same response in the North or in the East or in the West?
I'm going to say it varies. Obviously, yes, we're going to answer the call, but again, panhandling from division to division, it looks different based off, one, how we're getting notified, how often we're getting notified. That helps us on how we're going to allocate those resources. But absolutely, if a 911 call comes in, obviously we're going to answer that call for service. And we're going to look at that data to see, okay, if we're at Hewlin and Montgomery, and for the month of November, we've had over 100 calls at that location, then yes, we're going to create some type of detail and allocate resources there to minimize that impact right there at that location.
I asked that question just to say, you know, in the cases where, you know, certainly you don't want to criminalize poverty.
Right.
But in cases where there may have been, you know, someone that we've helped or someone that we've made note of, or we keep in a database of those people where there's been intervention, how do we know if it's habitual, things of that persistent? Just trying to kind of figure out what the system is like and trying to be impactful, I guess, or be effective.
Absolutely. And that's where our internal partners and external partners come into play, like our HOPE initiative. Every January, they go and they do a homeless count in which they can identify panhandlers in that count as well. And even our outside liaison, homeless liaison, that's where they play that role with capturing those numbers, capturing that information, so we know who is habitual, who is coming back, and what resources can we provide to them, or what enforcement resources we have to provide to them.
Well, my last comment would be if you could provide information on what we should be telling our residents in our area, like what the protocol is, if this is an issue, these are the steps you should take, and that way I believe it would convey our efforts as a city on what we're trying to do if we have some consistency.
Absolutely. To your point, we absolutely do not want to criminalize anyone that is homeless or in need of any type of help or resource. However, we have to educate, one, on how to make contact with police when you see it becoming a problem, right? How to call police, how to articulate what's happening at that intersection or surrounding area. I don't want to say discourage giving, but route them to resources or nonprofit organizations that take those donations in and then establish them out to the people that need them, like they know how to get to these certain individuals, versus just dropping money in on the street and you don't know who it's going to or what it's going to at that point in time. You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
We appreciate you very much. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Next is 25-0137, reappointment of substitute hearing officer, and William Rumley with our municipal court is here to answer any questions.
Nobody? Okay.
25-0138, regulation of special events and EMS standby service, and Taylor Paris, senior city attorney, is here to answer any questions, along with Richard Harrison, our fire marshal.
Anybody know?
25-0139, September and October 2025 report on the release of area from ETJ by petition of landowner, and LaShondra Stringfellow is here to answer any questions. Nope. 25-0140, Transportation Engineering Manual revisions, temporary street closures. Michael Owen, our, from TPW, is here to answer any questions. No questions. 25-0141, update on the Texas A&M Fort Worth campus project, and Roger Venables is here to answer any questions.
I think.
Roger, if you don't mind giving an overview. Thank you, sir. How's it going, Roger? Looks like it's pretty successful so far.
It's going great, Mayor. It's going great. Roger Venables, Aviation System Director. Well, good afternoon. It is going great. We are at the point of the project right now where we've finished up the design, full design of the building, the RIB, the Research and Innovation Building. As we began to wrap up that design work and the construction plans and permitting for the project, the university reevaluated the RILGC's participation in the project and what the university could do to go from this point forward to not only finance but head the procurement and construction of the building. And about 60 days ago, it had those conversations with us. It essentially removes the RILGC from participating in the project at this point, because the university can just take it from here through their natural procurement process. The contract revenue bonds that were issued by the RILGC to pay for the design and pre-construction services has all been serviced by the university anyway. They are going to retire that bond, so they are completely responsible for any of those costs that the RILGC had committed to the project at this point. They will be going directly back to TIFs 3 and 8. Again, this is part of the public parking component of the project. So rather than the RILGC entering into those agreements, reimbursement agreements with the TIFs, it'll just be between the university and the TIFs. believe we're planning for that maybe to occur next Monday to have that conversation. But yeah, all good news. We're staying on track again to commence construction next year. At this point, the university's Board of Regents is moving forward with the construction manager at risk to do the procurement process for the construction contract. And again, anticipate in their May board meeting of next year to approve construction and move forward with it. So it's all good news.
In the law department, the lawyers were really happy because it eliminated 13 documents from the process.
They're in here and they're joyful, you can see.
As joyful as they can be.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Okay, we're going to go back to
Yes.
25-0133, the Food Services Program
contract.
at City Hall, and Marilyn Marvin is here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jay. Sorry I missed this when you called it earlier. I did read through the IR. Got a couple of questions. I see that FUTA is taking a 20 to 25% commission in order to participate in the program.
Yes, Marilyn Marvin, Property Management Director. That is correct. That is in order for a restaurant or anyone to participate in the program with FUTA, that they do a commission of 20 to 25%, depending on the type of service they're providing.
At a cap of $600 per day.
So, no, that $600 per day is how much revenue that we purchase from that vendor. So if a barbecue place comes in, we have to buy city employees have to buy $600 worth of food. If we do not buy $600 worth of food, say we only buy $500, then the city has to pay FUTA $100 to make the $600 cap. That $600 doesn't have anything to do with the restaurant. They just pay 20 to 25% off of what they sold. So it'd be the $500.
Okay, so that's the part where we have spent the $55,000 to subsidize the program.
That is a correct statement.
Okay.
And most of that happened when City Hall was still half full.
Okay. I have some concerns about FUTA. I really want us to reconsider bringing in a different group or even manning this ourselves. I don't know if we have it in our household to do this, because I know there are several smaller entities, restaurants, that are not even able to participate in food because of the percentage that they're taking out, that they're not making any money.
Correct. And so we are right now working on a contract to have someone come in and assess the cafeteria. We hope to have that completed by the end of the year, the assessment, so we know what it will take to run the cafeteria. And then we will do an RFP during the first quarter of calendar year 2026 to see what interest we have and who could come in and actually run a different service outside of FUTA.
Okay, because I think when it was first mentioned to us that we were going to have different groups come in, but they was going to have the ability to use what you just described, the full kitchen. Because right now, nobody's using the kitchen. They're coming with pre-made food.
Right, so we have warmers that they use today, but outside of that, you are correct. No one uses the actual cafeteria kitchen.
And we did an RFP to get food the first time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the idea is, so I asked, why aren't we using the cafeteria? Back years ago, the old city hall, there was cafeteria. It was a full-blown cafeteria before it got downsized. And we would do an RFP for a contract for a local restaurant to come in and provider to actually run it and provide breakfast and lunch service. Part of it is that the kitchen hasn't been used since 2020. And so, as Marilyn said, we're bringing in a group to come and assess the kitchen to make sure we don't want it to blow up, right? To make sure it's safe and all those kind of things. And so they'll find out what needs to happen to make it in working order. Then we'll put out an RFP and have, back in the day, we had John Carter at City Hall for like 3 years. There were 3-year contracts. Then it would switch over, you put out another RFP, and you'd switch over to another local vendor. But hopefully, we'll figure that out, put out an RFP, and then we could have local businesses compete to actually run this food service out of our cafeteria because we're up to 1,500 people in this building. That should be plenty to be able to support a restaurant.
So the idea is to have one vendor.
Yeah, I don't think you could go multiple vendors because they can't make money because it's not consistent enough. That's one of the, if you did, then you're figuring out, when they do it and when they don't do it and their employees and all those kind of things.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing that come across our
me too.
table.
Any other questions on these IRs? Okay, if not, we're going to move into our work session agenda items. Let me flip back through here just a second. Yeah, we'll do first number 9, which is our possible local ordinance regarding sex offender residency. And Jairus Mapes and Eddie Garcia will be up to present those.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Council and Mayor. My name is Jairus Mapes. I'm an Assistant City Attorney and the Police Legal Advisor. And with regards to our possible ordinance regarding residency restrictions, we've identified a couple of issues that brought this to the forefront. One of which is the fact that we've got about 3,200 registered sex offenders in the city of Fort Worth. About 2,500 of those are offenders who had child victims. That would be under the age of 17. And approximately 877 of that number are on supervised release. And that is significant if they're on probation or parole, because oftentimes they already have a restriction that's been provided by the state. This leaves, though, when you subtract those numbers, this leaves about 1,500 registered sex offenders with child victims who have no residency requirements. Another issue that has come up is with many of our local cities and surrounding area here have started developing these ordinances in their cities. We are concerned that if Fort Worth has nothing, that we may become an area where people shift over from some of these other more restrictive areas. So that is another area of concern. So just to be clear, for the purpose of this type of ordinance, a sex offender is someone who is, of course, required to, by law, to register as an offender, and they must have a victim that was a child. And also, it's important to note, though, that we cannot retroactively apply an ordinance such as this. That would go against the constitutional rights of the individuals. Here are some numbers here to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. The left column is per one sex offender. We have, in the case of Fort Worth, we have 315 residents, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So residency restrictions are all based on preventing a registered sex offender from living within a certain distance of an area where children commonly gather. Also, some of these ordinances will have what they call rental restrictions, and that would prevent the landlord from actually renting to these same individuals in an area such as this. So note that the landlord would be responsible for identifying the possible applicants that they have, but that's pretty simple. You know, they already do credit checks and background checks. They have to pay for those and use, restricted access accounts. This is all for free, provided by the state, and it's very easy to look anyone up and identify them as a sex offender and what they were charged with. So there also an important side of the residency restrictions is preventing those from where children commonly gather, which is not consistently defined throughout the state. It is dependent upon the ordinance to define that. We've seen some ordinances that identified, of course, schools. Schools are always there. Daycare facilities, playgrounds, some youth centers, swimming pools, different facilities that have come to the attention of various cities as important to them to prevent people from living there. So I want to mention that the state legislature did address general law cities. Back in 2017, a lot of general law cities have been trying to adopt ordinances, but they were being met with a lot of lawsuits. And so to overcome that, the legislators did give permission for general law cities to have these ordinances. They specifically defined a child safety zone, and they did say that they could not restrict the individuals more than 1,000 feet from those areas where children commonly gather. Home rule cities were fine. There is no restriction on the ability to issue that. With regards to cases, there have been a lot of cases over the years for various reasons. There is a more recent one, though, in the city of Louisville, where the Fifth Circuit ended up addressing it. And so it's important to note, I think, that the city of Louisville did have a restriction of 1,500 feet from where children commonly gather. And this did really limit the percentage that was left remaining in their city. However, the Fifth Circuit did determine that there were no constitutional violations and that it was a legitimate ordinance. So enforcement, any violations of this ordinance would be, as always, a Class C misdemeanor. But it's also important to note that when registered sex offenders, they are required to register in the city that they live, and so there's a process. And in this case, they go to the police department, they go to register. They would be told that you cannot register because you're giving us an address that is not legal. And in that case, they would be denied. So that's going to give a motivation for that offender to live where they need to live, and if they don't, then they're going to be in violation, and it would be a felony at that point because they were not registered. A lot of these, from other cities, looking at other cities, we can see that a lot of the offenders will self-regulate. A lot of them are wanting to follow the rules. They don't want to get into any more trouble. Also note that when probation and parole first meet with them, they're exiting their prison term, and they meet with them, and they're saying, yeah, this is where I'm going to live. Oftentimes, the probation and parole officers will give them information on these ordinances as well. Again, it's another way to self-regulate. Specifically, the Fort Worth Police Department, just looking at some of their data, they had, use an example here, did residency verification checks over 2,800 times just in the first part of this year. So there's a lot of activity going on with that department right now. This is an example of the largest cities in Texas and how they are treating this. Houston has no ordinance. San Antonio has an ordinance of 1,000 feet, but theirs is unique. It's the only one I've seen like this, where they restrict not from where children commonly gather, but from parks, all parks. And so that was an interesting approach that allowed them to not restrict to just young victims. That means their victims can be any ages and can be restricted from a park. Dallas does have an ordinance, however, theirs is about remaining at or near certain areas. So theirs works more like a criminal trespass rather than a residency issue. Austin has none, and El Paso has a 1,000-foot ordinance. There's 3 slides here of various cities in our area and what they offer. I'll give you, an opportunity. You can read over that. If you have any questions, let me know. But you'll see a number of these cities are in our immediate area, and they cover a variety. It seems like the majority of them are using 1,000 feet. We do have a few 1,500 and one. Keller got creative and recently changed theirs to 2,000 feet. So maps, that's what we're going to look at next. And just know that for the purposes of our maps, we used a child safety zone of schools, and we did include charter schools in that, daycares, all the public parks and playgrounds, pools, community centers, and libraries. That's what we used. So I've got 2 sets of maps. The first set of these maps is an area you'll see here. We're using kind of an orangey red color. This is identifying all the restricted areas in the city of Fort Worth based on a 1,000-foot buffer. And you'll see on the left-hand side is a column of each council district and how much area is restricted based on the council district. We get the same thing, but now with 1,500 feet.
I have a question.
Okay, Council.
Yes, ma'am.
So go back to that map. So that tells me that only 40% of my district is restricted?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am. But keep in mind that that doesn't address things like airports, parks, commercial areas, all the areas that people would not live anyway. This just sticks to land mass, I guess you could say.
So that means that 59% is open to sex offenders to move in my district.
Well, the opposite. 59% is restricted. So the opposite would be the case. Now, our next set of maps will get a little bit more precise, and I'll show you the difference.
Okay. Am I understanding this right?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What?
Yeah,
Councilmember Peoples is District
5.
5.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. About 60%. Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So out of all the districts, all the sex offenders would move from every other district to mine, because 60%. Okay.
They might like...
Okay, 61.
They might like
Yeah,
District
Alan,
10.
You and me, we be picking up everybody. Okay, so go to the next one, though.
All right,
That's 1,000 feet. Okay.
1,500 feet. Now, same sort of thing. We are looking at just the restricted use. Percentages, as you can see, went up. Now you're at 56% now, restricted use. And then we go on up to the 2,000-foot buffer. And again, you see a lot of the red on there.
I want to be like Keller, but we'll talk about that.
Councilmember Crane.
But just for clarification purposes, again, if you look at District 3, there's a lot not developed out, right? So as it develops out, you could have parks, daycares, other things put in there, which further restricts the property.
Absolutely. That's why this first set of maps, I think, is probably not quite as accurate for what you're wanting to see. The next set, though, we're about to go to, specifically looks at what is available residential land use. And that makes a difference because this will take out the commercial use, takes out the airports, lake, whatever, takes out all that property. So now we see a Under 1,000 feet, the available residential land use for District 5 is 10%. That's a much better number. You must have a lot of commercial in your area. And then we move on to 1,500 feet. Those numbers are going down still. Again, it's green in this map. Green is what you're seeing is available land use. And we had been asked before, how are we measuring land use? We are using the city's zoning codes, and we are using all potential residential land use codes. So that even includes mixed use. We're including that in this. And then 2,000 feet, again, available, very, very low numbers available. And at the bottom, you will see the overall. Now, I will say that staff recommends 1,000 feet. And the reason, though, for that is because that is the standard buffer zone set by the state. That is what the state recommends, and they've required it for general law cities. That's also the standard buffer zone that is set by probation and parole. That is a number that they came up with that said that that seemed to be most appropriate. And of course, as an attorney, I'm always going to say that the least restrictive is going to pose less risk to the city with regards to something, this kind of an ordinance.
Well, that's less risk for the city, but more risk for the residents that live in these districts where we will encourage sex offenders to move. And I believe as a steward for the entire city of Fort Worth, we should be trying to look at that offers all of our residents the most safety. So I like the 2,000 feet. And I think we have to get creative and become risk takers because our job is to protect children from sex offenders.
Right, yes, ma'am. And I do want to point out, though, in talking about the risk, the reason why this perspective is there is because when it comes to a point that you have nothing left for these individuals to live, it becomes what the courts have referred to as a banishment. There is a difference between restriction and banishment. Banishment is considered a punishment. And so you cannot punish somebody again for something they've already been punished for. But we can be really restrictive, and that's not considered a punishment, if that makes any sense. That's the way the courts have looked at it. So we just want to keep that in mind when we're looking at all these numbers.
And I get that, but I also don't want to banish residents of certain areas of town. We are working to build up the south side and the east side and areas of the city so that people want to move there. And when we enable restrictions like that, we're encouraging the wrong people to move there. And people won't want to live there and to have their children go to school there if we have a large preponderance of a certain type of people.
Understood. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, other actions, Councilmember Beck.
I have two questions. As it relates to daycares, does this include in-home daycares that are registered?
If they're registered, yes.
Okay.
Only if they're registered. As we all know, there's probably some out there that aren't registered. That would not catch those. But anything registered, yes.
So I have a practical concern there in that parks and schools, facilities like that are built, they're not moving, but daycares can be much more mobile, particularly those in-home daycares. So how do we provide some sort of reliability and consistency for people to know if I'm in a, if a landlord needs to know I'm in a zone or not? That could be very dependent on whether or not the person next to him is operating his or her at-home daycare. So how do we provide some level of consistency and?
Well, the situation and that kind of thing is, first of all, we cannot be retroactive.
Right.
And so if I'm living in an area and some lady decides to move in next door who runs a daycare, that is not going to impact me because I'm already living here.
Right, but if you move out, the landlord is now required to do this check that they weren't required to do.
That is correct.
6 months prior. So how do we make sure that there's some sort of protection against that seems like a regulatory scheme that is very problematic to enforce. And the last thing that we want to do is create a standard that we can't enforce. And so my question is, when it comes to these more mobile type places, what do we have in place? I just want to make sure we have something in place that we've thought that through, because you're going to have landlords hemmed up because they were not required to do something that they're now required to do because a new person moved in across the street and opened an at-home business.
Right, exactly. In other cities that have established these ordinances, they set up a program using the GIS where anybody could go in and type in an address to see if that is restricted or not. And so those updated lists or registrations from the state on daycares would have to be circulated. They're not going to do it daily, clearly. It may be every 3 months or something like that, and there would be a way to keep track. And of course, but also keep in mind that you guys as council members can decide how you want this ordinance written. You could say that that's where children commonly gather does not include, say, a daycare that has less than 5 children.
Right.
Something like that. You could establish something that would make it a little less frequent to happen, but there is a way through a program in GIS to have those addresses identified by people.
Okay. And then my second question is, when you go to the Louisville case, and I haven't read it, but it said, in your summary of it, it said this ordinance left a limited number of properties available for purchase or rent. You gave us a really nice comparison, or the data that we drove down to for the city of Fort Worth. But if we were going to compare what the city of Louisville had left available that the court said was okay, where does the 2,000 foot, the 1,500 foot, or the 1,000 foot get us? Because I get what this case said, and at 1,500 feet, but you can't put apples to apples. So if they had 20% of their city left and they said it's okay, versus we're leaving 2% of our city. And so that
Right,
changes
and
the calculated risk.
unfortunately, the judges in these cases are not generous enough to give us actual numbers. They just say this particular ordinance is fair. And in the case of that Louisville case, it was over 90% was not available. But they don't say, but if you went to 96, that's not going to be good. They don't ever identify that for us, unfortunately.
Right, but we know in that case that they got to say 91% of the city was not available, and the court said that 91% was okay. Even if they didn't give us a higher end threshold, we know that 91 or 92% is acceptable.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Hill and then Councilmember Nettles.
Well, since we're on the legal case, has Keller had any legal issues with the 2,000 foot buffer? Do we know?
They just set that up not too long ago.
Okay.
And so I'm not surprised that they have not as of yet. It takes a while, number one, for someone to be motivated enough to do that. They have to have standing. They have to be able to say, in this case, the Louisville case, the guy wanted to live in Louisville. I think he already had property there before he got out of prison. And he had to move somewhere outside of Louisville. So that was his standing to say why he felt he was being discriminated against. However, those situations don't come up, especially the smaller the city it is, the more difficult it is for those cases to come up. And so no, we have not seen that, but it's just hard to say whether that'll come down the road.
I'd like to see some other cases, examples of cases that we could review before we start looking at ordinance. And then on page 14, I just need a definition. Dallas remains at or near. What does that mean?
Well, instead of saying you cannot live in this zone around a school, this says you cannot remain at or near. So you could potentially go and drop your kids off for school if you go and you leave. But if you're hanging out there, for whatever reason, or if you live there, obviously you would be remaining there. All of those are addressed through criminal trespass rather than just a straight up violation of the ordinance.
Okay, but there's no distance or time limit. It's just
They would, I don't know about time limits. I could go back and look. It's been a while since I've looked at their ordinance. I could go back and see if there's a time limit on it.
Okay, thank you.
And with regards to future case law information, do you want to stick to just Texas cases, or are you interested in cases in general?
I think examples in general.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Can you pull up the map for the 1,000?
This one?
Yeah. And so when we're looking at this map, and you said this map is concentrated on the zoning that currently exists in the city of Fort Worth.
Yes.
Okay. And we talked about getting creative. And so when you're looking at, I guess, District 5 and District, is this the correct map? Because you guys are recommending 1,000 staff.
Yes.
This is what you're recommending.
Yes.
Is there a way for us to get creative with zoning? We did some creativity when we rezoned a lot of killer properties to make sure that we save those properties, of rezoning properties within the city of Fort Worth to lower this amount.
I can't really see that. I mean, you may want to talk to someone that specializes in zoning rather than me, but the problem with that is what are you going to zone it to? I mean, you're going to zone it to commercial for this purpose, but that would mean someone couldn't live there, you know?
Not with the new.
Well, I mean, legally, I'm asking. So if we decided to, because that's a high amount. So if this is the amount that we're looking at, then I will lean with Deborah Peoples up going to 2,000, because this is a lot of property available for sex offenders to live. So if we're not able to be creative and change zoning where it gives a little bit more protection, where it's still 1,000 feet, but the zoning are changing where it limits the amount that can live in such districts, and maybe not the entire city of Fort Worth, but some that's highly populated, that's over 10% or 11.
Right, right. I mean, it's always possible you guys, are able to do certain things with zoning. So technically it's possible. I've just cautioned that it might end up creating more problems than we're solving.
Mayor?
Do we have an existing, so we don't have nothing on the record now?
That is correct.
So
Only
they can,
people that are on probation and parole would have any existing restrictions.
So I guess my question, because I want to make sure that I understand. When I look at this map, you're basically saying 10%, almost 11% of District 6 can have available residential use, meaning that there's nothing developed there now, right? But
That is
that's
correct.
how much
Those
is
are
open.
the residential possibilities.
Right, so that puts us on the higher end as compared to some of the other districts on this. And I don't know, I just, honestly, and maybe it sounds very selfish, but selfish on the behalf of District 6, I'm already fighting enough issues with regards to, I feel like, a certain level of proliferation of type of development coming into District 6. To me, you throw this layer on top of it, and it just really, it's like ice skating uphill. So I don't know what, when we first talked about this, I was very bleeding hard on this, and I was really hard on, because I don't want to be punitive to any group of people, and I do believe in rehabilitation and all types of things, but I feel like this does marginalize some of our communities much more, or impacts them much more inequitably than it does others. And I just really would like us to really, really think about this deeply on how we want to do it.
Well, and then, you've also got the 1,500-foot option as well. Councilor Lardorf.
So obviously, this is something we talked about a lot in public safety and made it quite clear where I stand on this. And I'd agree with Councilwoman Peoples is doing 2,000 feet. And again, we all know if it was me, it'd be 2,000 miles. But to your point, Councilman Nettles, I agree. So I don't think we necessarily have to get creative. I'm glad Dave Lewis is in the room, not to put him on the spot. But to me, that says we need more parks in 9, more parks in 10, more parks in 6, more parks in 7. We need more parks. Quite frankly, we need more parks. And so if there's parks or other areas where our children can safely come together and play, and that just so happens to put a restriction on somebody, again, they made that bed and they can lie in it. And if there's I understand your point, and I agree completely. And that's not something I think anyone wants to do in the city, is concentrate a certain amount of undesirables, if that's what I call them, in a certain area. And so I do think there are ways that we can work with staff and other ways to not necessarily banish anybody, because we don't want to do that, certainly. But we want to make sure we keep our residents safe. And although, just to point out to my colleagues, I know we got this nice little residency restriction in Fort Worth, and why we shouldn't do it. But just to point out, the author failed to mention that he was convicted of and served time for aggravated sexual assault of a 6-year-old. So forgive me if I don't give a damn what he says about any of this. And trying to use a example from Austin from a psychiatrist saying that restrictions like this can trigger an offender into offending again. I certainly don't want staff at any point to look at any restrictions and say, oh, well, we don't want to trigger an offender into no. So I appreciate all the work the staff has put into this, especially the maps. I think this is one that we really needed in the Public Safety Committee, so I'm glad this is what came together. And I'm, with my colleagues, I'm all for the 2,000 feet rule, and then challenging it and having enough faith in our city attorneys to fight that. And so, but I'm certainly, I'm just one of many here, so.
Councilmember Crane?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask another point of clarification on this. This is just property already zoned for residential use.
That is correct.
So it doesn't include maybe ag right now that might turn into residential? It doesn't?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I think we're getting to some point here where it's going to be a buffer of sorts. Just wish there was a way, I mean, we can't tell in the future, I get that, of what the property's going to be into the end use of it. But there's, I think, a lot more open property there than we're seeing as part of this, meaning ag that will probably go residential, or it could go industrial, who knows, but, or other industrial that's switched. But anyway, I just.
That's true.
Thank you.
Make sure you build a park in that new residential area. Anything else? Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a comment I want to put on the record is that when I'm looking at the map, if we're going to implement anything citywide, it needs to be equal around the city. So as we worked to do our district maps 2 years ago, we made sure that the percentages were as close as possible. And so I think if you're looking at one where it has 4% and the other one has 1%, we all need to get to 2.5, or we don't need to do this at all.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Beck.
I'd be with Chris on this. I think at the 1,000 foot, it creates clear pockets of concentration when you look at the maps. I think at 1,500 feet, it gets better, and at 2,000 it gets better. So I would be comfortable with a 1,500 feet or a 2,000 feet or nothing at all.
Any other comments or questions from council? Not really sure how to direct y'all.
Well, I certainly can research the case law.
I think we're going to come back with
Yeah,
that.
come back with that. That'd be helpful. And then try to discern all the comments you got today. And maybe,
And we heard 1,000's out, so a recommendation will
was
be
clear.
1,500 or 2,000.
yes.
Well, there's a lot of, the question about whatever zoned ag is not included in here. The new state law, because we started doing this, to change the open commercial can become apartments. That's not being captured in here. So there's a lot of things that are outliers that you just can't capture and
Right.
it can't be perfect. So at the end of the day, if you go to 2,000, and I'm not saying that's what, but you go to 2,000, there's going to be more land available than you're currently seeing here just because of those facts.
And it could be useful to have Teresa and TJ research what bills maybe come up last session around this issue that we may need to prepare for this coming session, just meaning we don't want to have this exercise in futility if in the end the legislature is going to do something around this, right? So, and how far they went along the process. I truly don't remember following anything last session, but I know they've dealt with it before, so. Okay, on to the next. Thank you very much. Okay, next up is mid-year program investments. City Manager Jay Chapa.
So I'm going to introduce this. So basically what this is when I started here at the city back at the end of January, early February, we were already through a portion of the budget preparation, and we were, as we looked forward, it looked like our budget was going to be tighter than it actually ended up being. So it didn't really look at any new programs to try to bring forward. And then during that time, especially through the spring, I did a lot of listening to council members, community members on priorities as we went forward. And so what I'm bringing forward, it wasn't part of the budget process, is 3 different initiatives. 2 have monetary impacts, and the other one's really just pushing forward an initiative that was underway so we can move forward more quickly. And I don't know who has the clicker. Christiane's going to do the first part, but basically the idea is to initiate some new programs that staff believes are critical for us to become more efficient and to have a big impact on the community on nuisance that is out there. What I've asked the departments is to, as best as possible, is absorb the cost associated with any new costs associated with this, and really one of them's capital related, and so it would be actually funded through the capital side, and we wouldn't see it in the general fund. Can you go to the next? So the 3 things are, the first one is a new group that would be doing centralized capital coordination and reporting, and Christiane will get into the details on that, but as we went through especially putting together the bond program, it was clear to me that there was too much silo work being done by the individual departments, and trying to bring that together in a comprehensive and efficient way just didn't exist. And the idea here is to really, within the lab, have a group that is on an ongoing basis working with the departments to do the reporting, to bring things together, and allow the city manager's office to have more clarity what priority projects look like based on the feedback that we're receiving from this council and from the citizens. And then the second piece is, like I mentioned, Christiane will talk about this also. It's an initiative that's already underway. It's around the Smart Cities program, and she'll explain that. But public-facing data dashboards to provide more data to be more transparent to the public. And so the lab will be working with departments to bringing those forward, and she'll provide details. And then the last one is what we're calling the Net Force, and that is a pilot program on nuisance properties, and y'all are probably really aware of these properties that we're going to be recommending, where cross-departmental teams will be on an ongoing basis doing reviews, doing inspections, and becoming a nuisance to the nuisance from the city side to hopefully get the owners of the property to either improve how they run their businesses and how they maintain their properties, and or hopefully maybe they decide to sell it and get out of that business altogether. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christiane. She'll do the first couple of the details, and then Brian Doherty will come up and talk about NetForce.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Christiane Simmons with the Fort Worth Lab. Like Jay mentioned, I have 2 topics for you today. Finance, your favorite topic, and data, which you seem to like more than finance, but we'll see. And then you'll get all Brian's energy to wake you back up. All right, so I'm gonna start with capital coordination and reporting. So you know this, just like I know this. As a very large city, we have lots and lots of capital projects going on at any given time. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, funded by billions of dollars in debt from bond programs, PAYGO funding, grants, strategic partnerships, and more, right? We have lots of funding mechanisms for capital projects. Each department that has capital projects also typically has departmental finance and engineering staff that helps with reporting, tracking, the status of those projects, the funding sources, et cetera. But what the organization kind of lacks right now that Jay mentioned is a centralized group that's sort of aggregating all of that from the different departments and then summarizing that and kind of communicating it regularly to the city manager's office, to you as council as appropriate, and then by and large to the public. So the city manager's first recommendation today is to carve out from capital funding a small group of capital finance staff that will live in the Fort Worth Lab alongside the budget team to sort of serve as that centralized group. So these are some of our goals listed here. First, centralized understanding of status and funding, so really gaining a transparent, sort of frequent understanding of all the things that are happening across the city, a bird's eye view of what's transpiring, what's going well, what's not, and then having a dedicated kind of non-departmental or neutral partner for some of the big multi-departmental or strategic planning large capital efforts, having a group dedicated to monitoring and reporting on what we're calling PITs, projects in trouble. Not that there's so many of those, but I've been in front of you a few times talking about, hey, we have capital shortfalls, capital gaps on bond-funded projects. So doing some more frequent and transparent monitoring on those. And then finally, some public-facing reporting. If you pay any attention to some of other large cities like dashboards and reports, you can even look at the city of Dallas. As much as it pains me to say, they have a great bond and construction management website where you can see quarterly reporting of how their bonds are being spent down, and they have like a public-facing project delivery dashboard too. We really like to do some of that. So in order to meet these goals, here are some of the services that we propose to provide out of the Fort Worth Lab in close collaboration with the capital departments and finance and the city manager's office. So we'd engage in more regular organized capital cleanup and closeouts, as well as regular scanning of the capital projects and reporting on them when they're maybe in trouble from a financial perspective or a delivery perspective, but also alternatively when we're seeing savings, having a more like a higher altitude conversation on how we're prioritizing those savings so that we're really getting the biggest bang for our buck, high impact, not just because maybe one department has capacity to deliver something else, but sort of scanning all the departments and their different capital projects. For bonds, we'd propose to work more closely with finance on the debt and cash flow planning, and then we do, again, regular monitoring and public dashboarding of some of those projects. You all know that we just completed a robust round of public engagement on the 2026 bond. Thank you for all of that engagement that you all did with us. And so some of you in your meetings, you may have heard a question, because we got it kind of all over the city, some version of how much have we spent on the 2022 bond, or like how many projects have you delivered from 2018 and 2022, sort of where are we? It was kind of hard to answer that question. You have to do a lot of manual data gathering, so we'd like to have that not just in preparation for the next bond program, but more on hand all the time. And then again, we want to be kind of a neutral, helpful stakeholder on special projects that are capital focused. Panther Island is a great example of that. You know, there's a finance subcommittee kind of working on a lot of that. So some of the departments may not have the financial expertise or the view of all the different funding sources and how they stack and the way they work and their restrictions. We can kind of play a role at the table in that perspective. And so speaking of bond engagement, some of you through that process met April Rose Escamilla. She was the primary lead and presenter at all those bond meetings. She's back there somewhere. Hi, April. She is our current Senior Capital Projects Officer in the Fort Worth Lab, so that's her little box there. We hired her mid-year last year through repurposing of a vacancy because we were kind of seeing the issues I'm describing at that time. So we thought, well, we'll hire somebody with a vacancy. We kind of created this job description that we'd never had before in the lab, and started having her kind of on-demand monitor capital gaps and the use of transportation impact fees, and she started helping with bond project development. Well, the creation of that role has helped us really see the opportunities that are available if we put some resources toward this. She's just one person, so right now she's being very reactive, but we'd really like to be more proactive on all these topics. So the proposal is kind of twofold. The first would be to hire a capital projects manager. This is kind of a small team to work alongside April. So this position would focus a lot on monitoring the actual projects on a monthly basis. And they'd be a skilled partner for the departments in the actual project development, the coordination of the multi-departmental efforts, and they could help forecast the different phases of the projects, which helps with like debt and cash flow planning. Part of what's making April Rose so successful in her current role is that she has a background as a professional engineer. And so we'd like to have at least one more person that can help speak that language, kind of speak to the capital delivery teams in their language and help then translate that over to maybe more of the financial or management team. And then the other two positions would have more of the background that we already have in the lab, budget and finance and some project controls. They'd be financial in nature, really helping to focus on the financial controls and sources. So they do things like regularly scraping the capital projects and their funding sources, kind of just making sure we're not having, cash sitting around, right, when nobody wants idle cash. So we'd like to keep our money moving, making sure we're spending down our most restricted sources first. They'd also focus on the large number of capital M&Cs, and you see all of those that appropriate capital funding. Right now that kind of happens all over the organization, so there's sometimes inconsistencies in the appropriation ordinances or in the way we award contracts. So we'd like to do that at a higher level of efficiency. This is my last slide in this section. So the objective here is to kind of show that we'd hope to be able to accomplish the goals that We've outlined without burdening the general fund, like Jay mentioned. So while we'll be focusing first on the general fund department, so think DPW, Parks, a couple of others, our proposal is to fund these 3 positions out of the capital projects themselves. So as part of a project's allocated soft costs, you can do some of that administrative costing. And so out of our $1.8 billion in active infrastructure investment across 798 active projects, this would be a very, very small percentage of that. So we think that's a good return on investment to kind of fill some of those gaps in service. Okay, so that is this section. Any questions on capital reporting and coordination? Or anything I missed, Jay, if you want to add anything? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So is this new strategy team going to prevent me from watching a street get torn up to be reconstructed and then watching it get torn up again 2 years later for a new water pipeline?
It will help.
Okay.
Nothing's guaranteed, but it'll help, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely the goal. And April Rose has been able to kind of leverage some of her existing relationships from water and transportation and public works to help with that stacking and phasing of projects. So that's certainly a goal. Okay, I'm going to move on. So public-facing dashboards, this is very exciting. So just as a reminder, the city achieved What Works City certification last year. And as a reminder, What Works Cities is the first standard of excellence for data-driven governance for local governments. And it's through Bloomberg Philanthropies. The city had been sort of half-heartedly pursuing it for a while, and then last year we got really serious about it and achieved silver certification. There are 3 levels. And so a number of you have asked what you can do to kind of help us in our next round, and we really appreciate that. We do want to continue to pursue What Works Cities at the next level gold in the coming years. So we're working interdepartmentally right now on some of those criteria that we need to meet. But even outside of that credentialing process, we're also aiming as a city to be more transparent in general and really focus on honing the data that we have in ways that are really helpful to the public. So right now, current resources include an open data portal. I think it's data at Fort Worth, Texas, or .fortworthtexas.gov. There are a number of data sources there. Some of them are just like individual kind of spreadsheet data dumps that they can, people can download and kind of play with. Permit locations, crime data, code violations, that kind of thing. Some of them are based on maps and GIS. And then we have other departments who have created other dashboards on their own departmental pages. They're difficult to find in many cases. You kind of have to go a couple of layers down in the website. And then over the last year with data analytics in the Fort Worth Lab, we've also been creating some dashboards for internal use. So starting in January, we'd really like to begin publishing several public-facing dashboards. We have many that are in progress or even complete, but we'd like to kind of slow trickle them out so that we can get in a really good rhythm of publishing, maintaining, quality control, and kind of taking in 2 or 3 at a time so that the public doesn't get like overwhelmed with all the dashboards. And we want to focus on quality control and validation, make sure that we're doing a good job. We expect that some of these dashboards will have more interest than others, but I've tried to kind of give you a smattering across the city of some of those that are really near to completion, if not complete now. So we have a budget dashboard. We have a page that's based on your priorities, which, excuse me, we'll revisit after the council retreat. We have some that are really close to being done, being validated around crime statistics and public safety response times, both police and fire. Homeless strategies is a work in progress that we've mentioned in this room recently. We still have more work to do that, but that will be of high interest, I think. And we have a lot around development services and permitting. So just a sampling of what might be out there for public interest.
A quick question. Since
Yes.
we're talking about transparency, is it worth having the conversation of doing the Transparent Star program through the comptroller's office?
I
Or doing
think finance already participates in the Transparent Star program, correct?
The more you know. Okay, we have 3.
Yes, maybe we need to do a better job
Good
of
job,
talking
Alan.
about that.
We already have that.
Okay, can we publicize that?
We should. We're going to create a headline across the top of the website. Yeah.
The comptroller's office announced the entities in Tarrant County about, I guess, mid-September, and recognized both the city of Fort Worth and Tarrant Appraisal District for their Transparency Star program participation.
So is it 5 stars? I don't know that much about it. I'm just asking. Do we know?
Do you know? 6 stars. Oh, we have 4 out of
We have
6.
4 out of 6.
Economic development.
I think that's a good opportunity for an IR. I'll ask later, but
Okay,
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Preview of a future agenda item. Got it. They got it. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think just as a note, as we shift toward transparency and doing more online, some of the questions I get sometimes from departments, not so much from council, is I think this is going to create a lot more questions. Like we're going to have to answer a lot, things because we're pushing more data out there, and that might be true. But in my research of larger cities, actually over time they see PIRs go down when you're pushing more data online, because I think it's like a lack of clarity and sharing that maybe creates confusion that leads to a PIR. So I think it's an important shift to make. It's certainly a best practice among large cities to have more data publicly available. So we're excited to advance our own efforts. This one is the topic that Jay mentioned that doesn't have a fiscal impact. The Fort Worth Lab has staff in place to create dashboards. We're the organization's primary creator of dashboards. We have the staff to help with basic visualizations, automating data and reporting, building pipelines to active data sources, all kinds of things, even more advanced data science and modeling, but that's not really part of our topic today. That's just a plug for the data science team. But there are definitely departments too that have the capabilities to create their own dashboards, and that is fine. So we just want to consolidate those into one place and make sure that there's a good strategy around publicizing those and validating them so that the public does not have to dig for information. So they'll all be hosted on the Open Data Portal, which is maintained by IT. And with each one, we'll work with CPE to create descriptions of what the dashboard is, where the data lives, how you should use it, et cetera. And Sana and I will work together on appropriate press releases so that we're really telling the story of being a more transparent organization. And then again, we'll have a good schedule for validating and responding to people who ask questions. Any questions for me on dashboards? Okay, if not, I'm going to give you to Brian. You can tell me which one of us you like more afterwards. This doesn't work, so you have to use that.
Any of that was necessary. How's it going, Mayor and Council? Everybody have a good July 4th? What? No, you can't nod along there. See, there's a curveball. We all know that was Thanksgiving. All righty. I'm pretty excited about this program. By the way, Brian Doherty, Director of Code Compliance. One of these initiatives that Jay has proposed to us, and we all got behind it, and it's pretty awesome, is a Nuisance Enforcement Task Force. And really what this is this comes down to, right now when I'm telling you about a nuisance and a property, every one of you have something different in your head that you're like, that property. Well, this is what this program is addressing those properties. And I say that where it's an all-out blitz, if you will. So there's gonna, it's gonna be a group effort from police, fire, environmental, code, obviously, water. If there's anybody that can play a role in improving the conditions on a property or the use on a property, that's what this team plans to take on. Here's all the departments that are participating. There's quite a lot. The biggest part of this, though, is that we're going to be doing joint inspections, and the joint inspections will be Code, Development Services, Environmental, Fire, and Police. And to give you a quick breakdown, this isn't simply joint inspections. These are from a code aspect. We're going to get into every single unit. If it's an apartment complex, if that means finding probable cause to get warrants or whatever we need to do, we're going to catalog and inventory every violation. And I say that where when we do these group inspections, so you have, this sample property, police, fire, code, everyone goes out there. Well, everyone's going to look at every possible thing they can address, and that's what they're going to cull in that group inspection. Well, from that, if we see a lot of building standard issues, we're going to pursue all the existing violations, but also it's going to go to Building Standards Commission. Just like as fire goes out there and they're like, okay, well, they have problems with their sprinkler system, well, they're going to pursue that. Same thing with police and every other department. And so in addition to these group inspections, it is every single thing that we can address at that property, and everyone's staying on top of it. The team will be meeting monthly. We're debating if it were bi-monthly, and that's where we're going to come back and go, hey, we rewrote this many tickets, we're pursuing this, and everybody's in the loop on what's going on, and so we're trying to get as much movement as we can on the property. This is a tool that Benjamin Samprat and Leanne and her team proposed. He's awesome, by the way. I bug him so much with emails, and he doesn't care at all. But this really beefs up CO revocation. And what this ordinance that they plan on proposing, I believe in January, is where if they have nuisances at the properties that don't normally fall into anything that allow us to revoke the CO, well, this now gives us that power. And I'm so excited for this ordinance. And I say that because once, we've made that determination, they have to have a set of standards they have to uphold, and they have to pay a fee. And if they don't, failure to adhere to the requirements is a CO revocation. And for those that, are not that are new to this or anything, but if you really want to stop use at a property, revoking the CO is the fastest way to get, or not fastest, most effective way to get movement at that property. So this is a really big tool that we're all going to benefit from, and I really appreciate that law has taken the effort to draft that up. This is the process I've described already a couple of times, and that's where we identify target properties. We do the targeted enforcement, and the one thing, and Jay touched on it briefly, that you guys need to know is there's not really a perfect scenario on these properties. We want it in compliance. If that means they decide to demolish the property, awesome. If that means we go through litigation and the receivership takes it over, but then they correct it, that's fine too. If they say, man, this is a lot of money and they're coming after me hard and I want to sell it, that's fine. The whole purpose of this is to be a nuisance to the nuisance properties, to make those property owners go, okay, whatever I was doing before, I am not going to be able to do that anymore, and the city's making sure of it. I've dealt with similar programs like this in my experience, and you get their attention. You do. One way or another, we will make them listen to us and get progress on the property. Here's a lot of the considerations when we were identifying the properties that we're looking at. Obviously, crime, as well as code violations. And here's one that I really appreciate, and that's the neighborhood impact. We all have been at a town hall or a neighborhood association meeting, and they are complaining that property A is causing all these issues that are in their neighborhood. We've all heard it. They're not lying. We need to act on that, and that's one of the criteria that we're using, as well as ownership efforts. Are they cooperating? Are they not? Because there are problem properties that we've dealt with, and we're currently dealing with, and the property owners are 100% cooperative and trying to do everything they can to correct it. However, this program is not that. These are the ones where they're out-of-state owners. They're non-responsive. They're essentially just getting money out of the property but not acting on anything. We have our 3 pilot properties. A couple of them are ones that we've heard several from citizens, and then the third one, to kind of switch up the different property styles, we have Rockies 1 and 2, their convenience stores, the Eco Motel, and then Sandy Oaks Apartments, and this sort of varies up each different property type. And that way we can track it, and we can see what's effective and what's not. And we have a little bit of data on each one. Actually, here's all the criteria that we spoke of before, and these are all the properties that hit on those criteria. And again, this is a pilot, so we're going to go through and we're going to fine tune it as we go. I do think it'll be successful, and then we can come back in 6 months and show all the great results and say, look, this is our criteria, this is how we're going forward, and it's going to turn a frown upside down, essentially. This right here is some police data. Oh.
Brian, I'm so sorry. Will you go back? Yeah. How far back did you pull data for this? Because I remember Rockies had a building code citation.
It was about, I believe we did it 2 years on most of the data. I think it was around 2 years that we had the data.
January 24.
Yeah.
You might need to check that box. We'll just talk to development.
Yeah.
They would know.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a chance we may have missed something. I'll definitely look at that. Here's all the police service data that, as you can see, the blue star is where the property is, and then the surrounding calls for service. And it's sort of a square rectangle argument. Every square is a rectangle, every rectangle is a square. All these calls for service aren't directly attributed to that property. However, it's very, very likely that property is increasing the area, the challenges in the area around it. And so that's sort of what the map is displaying, is there is a correlation with the numbers. And there's 478 calls for service, 16 offenses, and 4 for aggravated assault at Eco Motel. And a couple of these properties, it's also the surrounding area. So that's also going to include the vacant lot, the TL Food Mart on the corner. So it's going to be in conjunction with that whole area. This is Rockies 1 and 2, very similar. A lot of calls for service, 16 offenses, 3 aggravated assaults. This one is a little bit different. I only say that because fire won't really play a role in Sandy Oaks Apartments or apartments in general. They don't do regular inspections out there. Code compliance has a lot of issues, as well as police has a lot of issues. I also say that a little bit differently because there's about 100 units at this. So if you were to do a group inspection at Rockies or Eco Motel, not as intensive. If we're doing 100% inspection out here in a group inspection, that could take our staff around a week to accomplish because there's simply a lot of units to get into and check. And so, however, this is another one where I've heard from several citizens, And I don't want to, that's our role here is, they tell us the challenges and it's our job to fix the problems. And that's what we're doing in this apartment complex. Here's the estimated budget from each department that's going forward. I will stress to you that this is a sort of all hands on deck number, saying, so hypothetically, if police does a joint inspection and they go out there and like, oh, we saw drug activity, or they're going to have narcotics, or how they want to work prostitution, or any number of things. This is if everything is present at all of them all at once. So we're going to be tracking it as we go, and it more than likely will be substantially lower than that. And then there's a lot of stuff that, like the shared department tools, I'm definitely going to butcher this, but it's Telemi we had looked at as far as this massive database on all public data. So not just us, but the county, any federal data, all that. And they demoed it for us, and it's nothing short of incredible. And legal also is a big fan of it. And I say that where a lot of these properties will have shell corporations or LLC. They even have tools on there that tie all the ownership to those properties with like a web pattern, and it's pretty impressive. But it's those tools that we need to have the impact, because otherwise we're doing, the heavier lift of doing it all manually and tracking everything, and we've been doing that and we're not getting the desired result. So we're not trying to do the definition of insanity and do the same thing we've been doing, because we're not getting the desired result. And so that's all the breakdown for each departments. And then we're already setting up our first joint inspections for January, and we have a point of contact on each one. I'm really excited for this program. I think it will have a significant impact, and I know you guys are tired of hearing the same complaints that you hear about these properties, and so, we're gonna get a solution to that. We're gonna work towards it. You guys have any questions?
I was just gonna mention, as I said earlier, the goal is to see if we can't absorb these costs. And that was a top-end cost, so hopefully we don't reach that level. And my goal is that we see benefits and we see a positive impact, is that you can expect to see a decision package coming through for next year's budget as a recommendation to do this program and maybe expand it and see how it goes forward. But I've been here for 25 years and 26 years, or started in the mid-90s, and Echo Motel's been an issue since the mid-90s. And the city's done a whole lot of stuff, and somehow, even when it changes ownership, all those kind of things, it comes back to be what it is now. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to see if we can't, especially with the change in the ordinance that allows us to pull the COs, that we can actually make a huge difference in some of these neighborhoods.
Councilmember Peoples.
I love this, not because one of my properties is included in here, but I have talked about the need for intense innovation when we look at some of these. And I think I've got a service station, out-of-state owner. It's just been a mess because everybody, working separately can't do something about it. So I love this idea of bringing everybody together so we get in and intervene early, and let's get some of these things closed.
Yes, Councilmember Hill and Councilmember Larsdorf.
Brian, just because I'm curious about the correlation and the update in 6 months, can you also include any animal welfare violations that are at these properties during that time period?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Larsdorf.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two questions. What's going to be the approach for some of those vacant properties that are just, always a nuisance? Like for example, in District 4, that's a huge problem, but it's apparently in foreclosure right now, so no one really knows who owns it. No one's keeping it up. Will there be a similar process for the city to basically take ownership of that, or is there going to be a strategy for these vacant properties too, or is this just right now only for occupied?
Right now, it's that criteria that we're looking at to meet it. Typically, although vacant properties do have a lot of issues, a lot of this centers around the use of the property and everything else. So it's not the exact same, but it is something that we can put a more coordinated effort on vacant properties as well. This property is really not that sort of tool, but it's also something where I'm not opposed to using it on the same approach sort of here and there, but these three are what we identified working here. But it's also something where I'd love to come back in 6 months and we say, well, actually, it's now these three properties because we've corrected the issue. So it's going to be, there's no shortage on the list of what we need to work on. And so, but no, I can definitely separately sort of parcel out some other things if you wanted to.
And I don't think that we could have a budget big enough to tackle all of them at the same time. So this is a pilot, see how it goes. If it works, then we rotate another 3 and request a budget to be able to do that on an ongoing basis.
Gotcha. And then the last thing was just as far as the like the clock resetting, because I know before one of the biggest issues was if they made any sort of adjustments, then that clock would reset, giving them more time to, you know, abate the nuisance. Does this just give everyone just more teeth? Like, all right, you try, but just not hard enough, and then take legal action?
I
Or?
failed to mention, we're also going to be collaborating with ACT.
Right.
And they are interested in the program, and they'll be able to bring private, if they can find somebody that would stand up as the complainant, and they would be able to bring forward a lawsuit that includes general law or common law, which makes it that harder to happen. So the city would use our tools, and then they would partner on the other side with their tools.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's I believe what you're referencing is the 125 lawsuits. That's a part of this process, but it's not all of it. So the litigation side of it, you know, that may be one of the avenues, but that will not have any bearing on the group inspections, the enforcement on that aspect.
Councilor Nettles?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what my question with what we're doing. Is that going to help us on the legal side? You know, because
Well, I was just going to say, we have 3 ordinances that we're working on that you'll see coming forward after the first of the year. One of which it does address vacant buildings. That may need to be part of the budget process because it will need a department that owns that process because it will have a registration component. But yes, we're definitely looking, of course, we have this habitual nuisance ordinance, and then there'll be a 3rd ordinance that we'll bring forward to you guys. We are looking at beefing up everything we can that's on the books.
yeah, because I think that's going to help out a lot. And I'll be interested in seeing maybe the top 20 properties that may be on that 1 to 3. And I don't know if your property made it because you always hollering about none of your properties on there. So, because I have Riverside and Berry that should be in front of yours. So I look at the 20 properties. You do a good job. You do a good job.
Councilmember Beck and then Councilmember Laylock.
So I'd just like clarification real quick. With a little over $3 million, and that will serve this effort on how many properties? Just 3 or more?
Top end, just the 3 properties.
So $1 million per property to clean it up.
Well, to hopefully make a difference in it, yes. But hopefully, as we go along, we become more effective and efficient on how it's run. It's the worst-case scenario. That's what we asked staff to put together. And again, we're going to try to absorb it within the general fund. So as we come along, we may be asking, some months in to say, we'd like to move X money out of non-departmental. We're not going to do this, and instead move it to cover this and those kind of things.
And Alan, if you look at it, you're talking about 800 calls to police, you got to dispatch police, all of that. So, I mean, when you start breaking it down, I think it becomes even less than that.
Anyone else have anything? Councilor Flores? No? Everybody's good? Thank you. Very exciting. Jay, anything else? No? Okay. Moving to possible discussion of charter election in 2026. Gavin is going to lead us through this.
Mayor, Council, good afternoon. Gavin Midgley, Assistant City Attorney, here to discuss a possible charter election for the May 2026 election date. So as you're aware, the city's already holding an election on the May election date for the bond program and also for the District 10 council seat vacancy. So adding a charter amendment election wouldn't be a significant cost to the city because we're already holding an election. And so this presentation is to seek council direction on whether or not to move forward with holding a May 2026 charter amendment election or consider alternative options. So if you did move forward, some possible charter amendment propositions could include mayor and council pay, reducing the quorum from a 2/3 to simple majority or 60%, shift setting council meeting scheduling from to staff, eliminate public hearings for department heads, council appointees, eliminate the restriction against budget adoption at the same hearing as the budget hearing, and revise the streets privilege requirement in the charter to eliminate an individualized ordinance. Some of these are continued items that were identified in the 2016 task force, charter task force, and some are results of changes in law and practice over time. Some more possible amendments would be to remove the requirement for an ordinance to create or abolish or reorganize departments that are not required by the charter. I think there's 7 or so departments required by the charter, or remove the charter requirement to have departments altogether. Another one would be to remove the requirement for an annual report by public service corporations, and then possible changes to council terms, either increasing lengths, staggering the terms, or term limits, or all of the above. And then there's some modernizations or updates to current laws and practices that the charter currently is not in compliance with.
Mayor, can I ask a couple of questions?
Rahal?
Could you've kind of given us like kind of an overview of what some of the possible ones. Could you perhaps give the context of like what the motivation is for proposing these changes? For the ones that are like aren't obvious, I mean, does that make sense? So like
on the
why are
last
we
page.
eliminating public hearings for department heads or council appointees? What
Sure, so-
barrier or obstacle would that remove?
Some of these were recommendations that were continued from the 2016 Charter Task Force, where there was a citizen task force assigned to review the charter, and these were recommendations that they made, and some are at the recommendation of city staff.
Yeah. Councilmember.
Just to make things easier for
Yeah.
staff in the city.
So some of these goes back to the charter, back into the 20s, 30s, 40s. Laws have changed. And so Texas is an at-will state. The directors and assistant city managers are at-will folks. So under HR laws, the charter requires or provides a person, if they are being disciplined or if they're being terminated, the charter provides that they get to do a public hearing or a public presentation to the city council about their situation. But the city council has no impact. They can't rehire the person. It doesn't really mesh with how, the actual state laws and how the system works. But it's a carryover from being in the charter for all those years before we became a city manager form of government.
Okay, so on that one, so for instance, is that something that happens a lot?
What's happened, it ends up happening with the city in reality is if a person gets terminated and then they hire an attorney, and they want to sue the city, then the attorney makes a case that they didn't get their day in front of the city council because they didn't have the ability to appeal. But at the end of the day, the appeal doesn't mean anything because the city council can't hire them. And so it kind of just muddles up the whole process and muddles up what's really available and not available to them. Again, because we became a city manager form of government, and this was in the charter since before then.
And then my other question, which I have a few, but I know we've been here in a long time. So the part about restriction against budget adoption at the same meeting as budget hearing, what obstacle or barrier does that eliminate or preclude?
So there's currently a quirk in the charter where the budget cannot be adopted at the same meeting as the budget hearing, and so that creates a weird scenario where the city has a separate meeting and then closes that meeting and has another separate meeting. It's not a requirement to do that except for our charter, and so this would be to eliminate that so that it's more seamless and you can adopt the budget at the same meeting that you have a budget hearing.
Okay, all right.
So looking at the mayor and council pay possible charter amendment, just a brief history, and this amendment has come up 2 times in the recent history. 2016, it failed, and then again in 2022, that failed, but by a much narrower margin. Those numbers for the 2022 one at that time would have been, I think, $99,000 for half of the average salary of department directors, so $99,000 for mayor, $76,000 for council members. And that's the 2022 numbers. I imagine if you propose the same amendment index to half of the average salary of department directors and assistant department directors, that those numbers would be increased since 2022, but I don't have those numbers offhand. Some other options on council pay would be to specify some fixed base rate with an adjustment mechanism, index it to an outside benchmark such as Tarrant County median household income. That 85,350 number is for a household, four-person household, and you could scale that up or down as you desire from that figure. Another option would be to authorize council to set it annually by ordinance, but with a stated cap, similar how Austin does their council salary. It's set by ordinance, but their charter doesn't include a provision regarding council salary. So looking at mayor and council salary again in terms of what has passed in other cities and what has failed, the benchmarking to HUD AMI has passed in San Antonio recently in November of last year, and in El Paso in November of 2018, and those are the reference figures for those. Dallas had a charter amendment election which included mayor and council pay in November 2024, and they included fixed numbers, and that failed. And then you'll see some of the smaller cities do it by meeting, just for some reference, not suggesting that for City of Fort Worth. And then council term limits, this is just a comparison of other big cities, the other big cities in Texas and their current term lengths and term limits, and the thought process behind potentially including term limits on a charter amendment election would be it might make the council pay salary more palatable to voters if there's term limits also included. So timing for a May 2026 election, February 13th is the last day to order an election. So if you wanted to include charter amendment propositions on a May 2026 election, that's the last day in which you need to order an election. And then election day is May 2nd of 2026. So if you do want to proceed with a May 2026 charter amendment election, we'd bring back another work session to review the specific proposition language that you'd like to include on the ballot. And then we would bring forth an ordinance to call that special election for the charter amendment. And those propositions would be added to the ballot along with the bond propositions. But regardless of the decision you make, we do recommend a charter review before the end of 2028. So, any questions?
Thank you, Gavin. Questions or comments from council? Yep, Councilor Nettles.
I think it's a good idea to pursue now with the fact that it's not going to cost us any additional dollars for putting the charter election along with our bond. And so I would like to kind of discuss briefly, or if there's another work session, what options work best for this council. I think we all kind of agree with the charter amendments because we already went through those the last 2 years. So I don't think that's a problem with that. I think the issue is whether we want to put the mayor and council pay on there. And I think everyone around this table does enough work and deserves to. And I know some might think it's volunteer, and it is volunteer. I don't think you can. That amount is not going to subsidize what we do. And so I would think that if you can go back to that maybe slide where you talked about a fixed rate or putting it towards the house medium.
This slide?
Sure. Yes. So I think that it should be a rate that we put up there because I think a lot we heard people didn't understand what the amount was going to be, and I think it'll fill about 1,200 people. So I think there has been some numbers done that it possibly can't pass this next go around. And those are some of my just general thoughts.
Chris, any other comments or questions from council? No. So for today, Gavin, your main clarity is a move forward for a work session agenda item again on the 6th. So we
Yes,
can work
whether or
through
not you
some
want
of
to see
these
it back on
specifics.
a work session with specific charter proposition language.
Okay. Does that sound okay, council? You kind of digesting what they've suggested here today, and we can work on it again in January. Okay. Thank you very much.
They have a suggestion on the mayor and council pay. They just gave options. The suggestion was kind of just on the amendments.
Well, I think they probably were, I'm not going to speak for legal, but they probably were just giving us some insight into what other cities have done successfully, maybe also comparing that to what has not worked here in Fort Worth. And so really it would be up to this body or some other mechanism or some other idea you may have to look at what that would be if there was consensus on council to put it on a charter
Sure.
election on the ballot. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next up, Stormwater Valley Storage Regulation Recommendations. Ben Thompson, TPW.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So today I'm here to talk about flood mitigation and specifically as it relates to Valley Storage. So I'm going to talk about what is Valley Storage. I've talked with several of you already about this and I really appreciate your time. What are we proposing exactly? And summarize how that's going to affect our residents and development and then what the next steps are. So what Valley Storage is, in the simplest terms, Valley Storage is the amount of flood water that fills up in the floodplain between 2 points. It's just, so the flood water that you see on the right side, that is some quantity, some volume of water. And so what research has shown, including case studies here in the city, is that when we fill in that Valley Storage over time, we have increased flood risk downstream with respect to increased flood levels and erosion. So it can be very tempting to fill in these empty spaces because they are empty, not full of water most of the time. And so it can be tempting to develop, even if we're developing, up high out of the floodplain. However, over time, little by little, these add up and increase the flooding to structures, roadways, and create major erosion issues. So here in the city of Fort Worth, right now, we do allow filling in the floodplain. And so this is one example. This is Big Fossil Creek. So what you see on the left is an area of 2019. A lot of that floodplain was filled in. And what you see on the right, the floodplain was remapped. And now we have one development by itself that probably had minimal impacts, but as the entire watershed is developed and filled in, that's when you get problems years down the road. And it's the folks downstream. So this particular development did everything by the book, got all the permits, city and FEMA floodplain permitting, and did everything correctly. So Valley Storage in Fort Worth is not a new concept. We have been regulating Valley Storage since the mid-90s. And what you see here on this map, the blue is the Trinity River. So it's the West Fork and the Clear Fork of the Trinity River. That's the area that we have been regulating since the 90s. And we got together, this is a program called the Corridor Development Certificate. We got together with all the different communities along the Trinity River, and this is a program that is facilitated by the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We get help from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They help review things for us, and then we make recommendations on whether someone can develop. What we would like to do is we took a look at what other cities are doing this citywide. So we would like to expand it. Let me go back one slide. We would like to expand the regulations beyond the blue into the purple, so citywide regulations. And I'll explain exactly what that means. But you never like to be the first or the only city doing something when it comes to regulations that affect development, right? So we are really the last major city in Texas to do this, and we had the advantage of looking at what works well and what doesn't. So this is not something we did overnight. We've been doing this for over 5 years, and we did case studies so we can quantify what are the actual effects here in Fort Worth. And we did, like I said, benchmarking. We met with council committees. We met with DAC a bunch of times. We presented them with red lines of the floodplain ordinance and the recommended changes so they could give us a lot of feedback and input. And we also had our own specific stakeholder group. So all the feedback that we were given is that, yes, this is something that we need to do citywide. The recommendations from the development community is we don't want more permits, we don't want our permits to take longer, and we would like for some exemptions. So some of those exemptions would be like utility crossings or roadways where you just can't mitigate, or instances where there's property ownership issues. So what are we recommending? Before I move on to that, we, as I mentioned, we met with the DAC a bunch of times, and we were able to get a letter of recommendation from the DAC in October. They said, yes, you have our support, and we believe this meets the goals of the city. And so that was really big for us to have their support before we move forward with recommendations to council. So what exactly are we recommending? This is a very simple graphic, but all it is if you put 2 scoops in the floodplain, you got to take 2 scoops out. That's it. We're not saying you cannot develop in the floodplain. We're just saying it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And to make things simple, the floodplain is mapped throughout the city with the FEMA floodplain, so we're going to use that as the boundary. We do have some exemptions, exceptions, such as utility work, where it's just really difficult to mitigate that, and certain city projects that are difficult as well. So these regulations, just like other floodplain mitigation, are going to be recommended with an update through the floodplain ordinance. And so the bottom line is this really is going to protect our residents from flooding, mitigate that risk long term. This is a really long vision look, because 1 scoop in the floodplain is not going to make a difference, but 1 million scoops over 30 years is really going to add up. So how many developments with this impact? We went and looked back. It's about 75 a year, 75 studies that are done each year that would have to look at this. That's not to say 75 projects are just dumping a bunch of fill in the floodplain. That's just to say that these are the ones who would need to take a hard look at it and maybe give us some calculations. So we do want to consider that, there are going to be some grandfathers. So if someone's already submitted one of these studies, we're not going to make them go back and redo a bunch of stuff and redo some calculations. So we were able to meet with most of you council members over the last month. Thank you again for your time. We got some good questions and feedback from you. So here we are today with the council's work session, and then the hope is we'll be able to notify everybody, all of our stakeholders, the engineers, the development community over the next month, 6 weeks, month, and then the February 1st, these regulations would take effect. And that is all I have, unless you have any questions.
Any questions, council? No discussion?
No questions, but I just wanted to thank your department for such a good explanation. I was able to share that with several of my homeowners associations in floodplains, and they were very pleased.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Ben, appreciate it. Okay, proposed zoning amendments to alleviate the proliferation of certain business uses. Stephanie Scott Sims, Development Services. Stephanie.
Hello, good afternoon. For those who I have not yet met, my name is Stephanie Scott Sims, and I am the new planning manager here. And today I'm going to be talking about the alleviation of the proliferation of certain business uses. So just to give you just a kind of overall summary of what this is about, the purpose of this presentation is really to address council members' concerns regarding the overconcentration of certain uses within commercial corridors. including liquor stores, payday lenders, smoke shops, and pawn shops. Again, this is just to promote the balanced land use and protect neighborhood vitality. And staff is recommending zoning amendments to address these concerns. I do want to note that due to these amendments that certain businesses may become non-conforming and that new ones would be required to meet the requirements, the new requirements. Just some background for you. Last year in 2024, staff presented IR 24-1867, which reviewed high proliferation business types, which included liquor and package stores, credit access businesses, retail smoke shops, and pawn shops. Staff further went back and further reviewed regulations in similar comparison cities, if you will, like Arlington, Dallas, Plano, and Irving, and San Antonio and Austin to see what they require for these types of uses. And we are recommending the following zoning amendments. And this is just a overview of those zoning amendments. So for liquor and package stores, we are looking to, we are suggesting to define what a liquor and package store is, for one, removing them from the E and MU1 zoning districts, which are our neighborhood serving commercial areas, and adding a 1,000-foot separation distance between those uses. So that would be between new and existing uses. For credit access businesses or payday lenders, again, we are looking to define that use in the zoning ordinance. Right now, those uses are regulated under our financial institutions land use, which includes banks and credit unions. And then we are suggesting to limit those uses to our G through K zoning districts, which are heavier commercial and industrial zoning districts, as well as select form-based districts, which would be our form-based districts that are non-residential in nature. We are also proposing to add a 1,000-foot separation distance between those uses. For retail smoke shops, we are suggesting that we amend the definition. Currently, the definition of retail smoke shop includes a threshold. So for smoke shops, to be considered a smoke shop, you have to basically have gross retail sales. I think it's 91% of your gross retail sales have to come from tobacco-related products and accessories, and we are recommending that we amend that and lower that standard to 51%. And 51% is because that signifies that the majority of your sales are related to those types of products. We are suggesting that we add new sensitive uses to the list of existing sensitive uses. So right now, retail smoke shops are required to maintain a 300-foot separation distance from certain what we call sensitive uses like schools and universities. So we're looking to add some new sensitive uses to that list and increase that buffer from 300 feet to 500 feet. We're also suggesting to add a 1,000-foot separation distance between those uses. For pawn shops, we are proposing to increase the separation distance. So there's already a separation distance in the zoning ordinance between those uses, which is 500 feet, and we're proposing to increase that buffer to 1,000 feet. And lastly, we are adding a definition of bar. The city does not have a definition of a bar within the zoning ordinance, so we're looking to add a definition that's consistent with the TABC regulations. and also to revise the definition of restaurant. So I have some general information about liquor and package stores. This is a map that shows where all of the liquor and package store locations are within the city, and the council districts in which they're located. So this is a heat map, which shows you kind of the density of where those uses are located throughout the city. Again, liquor and package stores are not currently defined in the zoning ordinance. They are allowed by right as of right now in the E neighborhood commercial and MU1 mixed use districts, and they're permitted by right in the F, G, H, I, J, K, MU, and MU2 and certain form-based code districts. And then Section 404 of the city code prohibits those sales within 300 feet of some of those sensitive uses like churches, public schools, and public hospitals. So our proposed amendments include defining liquor and package stores as an establishment principally for the retail sale of alcoholic beverages as defined by TABC. And removing liquor package stores as a permitted use by right in the E neighborhood commercial and MU1 mixed use districts, which are again our neighborhood serving commercial districts. Establishing a 1,000-foot buffer between liquor package stores. This one thing to note is the measurement and how that would be measured. So we are proposing to measure that in a direct line from the property line to property line, not door to door or like sometimes other uses are measured. This is our standard measurement. I believe there are some uses that we do measure from door to door because we're required to by state law, but generally this is how we measure. And then one item for discussion is whether to add daycares to that list of sensitive uses. For credit access businesses, I have some general information about those. Again, here is a map of where these uses are located within the city by council district. And we are proposing, again, to establish credit access businesses as a defined zoning use and separating it from banks or financial institutions. We are proposing to limit credit access businesses uses to our heavier commercial and industrial districts and all form-based districts except certain districts that are residential in nature. And then we're suggesting that we establish a 1,000-foot separation distance between those uses. Retail smoke shops, this is a map showing all of those uses within the city and where they're located by council district. Again, these uses are defined currently as stores that derive 90% or more of its gross annual sales from the sale of tobacco and related products. We currently have a retail smoke shop sensitive use buffer that prohibits the sale of these or the location of these stores within 300 feet of schools and universities and hospitals. And these definitions and the buffers, they're also codified within the city's smoking ordinance, so that would also have to be updated. And again, retail smoke shops, we're proposing to limit or lower that percentage threshold from 90% to 51%, establishing a 1,000-foot separation distance between retail smoke shops, and increasing the sensitive buffer distance to 500 feet from 300 feet, and adding public parks, places of worship, and daycare centers to that list of sensitive uses. And lastly, amending the chapter 29.5 smoking ordinance. Pawn shops, one thing, here's another map of the pawn shops and where they're located within the city. And one thing I did want to note about pawn shops is that in 2006, the City Council approved a zoning ordinance text amendment that removed these uses from the E neighborhood commercial and MU1 mixed use districts. So as a result of that, there were 14 existing pawn shops that were made legal non-conforming by that action. So later on in 2010, council initiated a rezoning of those 14 legal non-conforming pawn shops to a PD to make them conforming uses. So here is a list of those pawn shops where they're located. And so they would not be affected by these changes in the ordinance because they're conforming uses. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, unless something happens that makes them non-conforming. For pawn shops, we are proposing to increase the separation distance between them from 500 feet to 1,000 feet. And then bar and restaurant, again, we're proposing to define the word bar and the term, and amending the term, the definition for restaurant. Bar means an establishment that basically derives 75% or more of its gross revenue from the sale of alcoholic beverages, as defined by TABC. And then restaurant, we just kind of reconfigured this. We removed some wording and made it much user-friendly for both staff and the public. And that is all that I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, very thorough. Any questions or comments from council?
I just want to say thank you. That's all I have. Thank you. I've been really excited about this ordinance. It was something that District 6 was very passionate about, especially with the proliferation of liquor stores and smoke shops. So thank you for bringing something. I think that it's reasonable and fair, and I think will be very supportive for our residents and our city overall. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you very much. Okay, council, that's the conclusion of our work session agenda items. Are there any future agenda items to provide to CMO? Councilmember Blaylock, I'll move around the table.
So this is not necessarily an IR, but it is a request to understand what it would take to reconfigure this room so that we all have line of sight to the speaker, as was highlighted earlier today, whether that's moving to the podium to the center or rearranging so the speaker's not behind us on either side.
Yeah, good question. And Elizabeth and then to Macy.
In a recent, our NLC trip to Salt Lake City, I was able to take a tour of their film industry and what they do to promote it. And one thing I realized is that we don't have a set of best practices here for how we best integrate our film industry with our neighborhoods. So I would like staff to work with Visit Fort Worth and the Film Commission to really look nationally at how other cities that are promoting film the way we are permit and handle that, the interplay between our neighborhoods and our streets. For example, Salt Lake doesn't allow them to shut down a street for an entire day. They have PD there to support them, and they shut them down for shorter periods of time. So it's things like that that I think we can get out in front of.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill?
I already mentioned my IR request about the transparency stars. I think that would be helpful. But I did want to, on the MNC log on item number 21, prior to our meeting next week, could we have Midori circulate the annual artwork plan for the fiscal year 2026? I haven't seen that, and I'd like to see it beforehand.
Yep. Councilmember Flores?
Yeah, to request TPW staff in the legal department to look at evaluating creation of noise ordinance enforcement signage. You know, for certain areas that we have repeated violations of that. They could be done in combination, say, with no cruising. I'm talking specifically about the stockyards, and I'm not necessarily saying let's revisit the no cruising, ordinance matter again, because at the time, Chief Noakes decided to park that for the time being, but this continues to be a problem, specifically in the stockyards where there is still an existing no cruising ordinance. So what I'm thinking is maybe in combination, we can come up with some appropriate signage to notify people. If you're pulling in there, you want to have a good time, great. But don't crank, your radio or have some obnoxiously loud, engine or, muffler system.
Any others, council? Yeah, Councilmember Nettles, and then Councilmember Peoples.
Yeah, I have one. We had developed something when we had the issue with LBT Rise Daycare about adding them to a list to have police come immediately. I think that put something at the daycare. Well, I wanted to see how we can do that, to add that same thing to the YMCA's, or if they're already added. Child Care Associates. Okay. It was like a smart button.
You like an hour or just a request that happen? I'm clarifying.
I mean, if it's just a simple request, that's fine.
Okay, we'll find out and then we'll get back to.
Okay.
Councilmember Peoples.
No, I just want to thank all the staff. Today was probably one of the best work sessions I have been in since I've been on the council. I thought very thoughtful, well thought out presentations. And so I am appreciative. I know it takes a lot of work for you all to have to come down and present to us. And a lot of time and energy goes into those presentations. And I just want to tell you, they were well done and well received. And thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I just have one, Jay, and also it's from Midori, we've talked about this, I think, at a CMO level several times, but utilizing our libraries specifically, and then maybe using Parks and Rec in this conversation too, community centers, where there's vacant space or possible space to activate, specifically for our art community. And I know Midori had an interest in that when she first got here, so if she wants to take the lead on what she's already thinking about and present something in January, that would be helpful. Anybody else? Okay, we're gonna adjourn this meeting. We have CCPD. So there's pizza. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break at their request because they gotta flip things over for cable and then come back. Meeting adjourned.